Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the Town of Somers Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. The date is November 20th, 2018. Denise, would you please take the roll?
Ms. DiPolito?
Here.
Mr. Gio?
Here.
Mr. Hardin?
Here.
Mr. Newman?
Here.
Mr. Santoroni?
Here.
Chairman Canistra?
Here.
Thank you.
I request everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to start the meeting tonight with the first item on the agenda of Erstadt Biddle Properties, Inc. This is an application for an area variance for more than the number of pole signs allowed located in a neighborhood shopping district at 325 Route 100 in Somers. Sir, are you here to represent the applicant?
Yes, sir, I am.
Please give us your name and your relationship to the applicant.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Andy Albrecht. I am the Vice President and Director of Management and Construction for Erstadt Biddle Properties. I'm filling in for the president of our company this evening, who is away. At this time, the application, as you know, is for a variance on the number of pole signs at the property. We have the Somers Professional Building out right on Route 202 across from the DeChico's property that's being built.
Right.
And over the years, for one reason or another, this building has suffered from random and differing signage applied to the building. Some of it, or most of it, was non-conforming, too many signs on the building, and through meetings with the Architectural Review Board that started back in June of this year, we worked with them extensively to try to clean up, if you will, the look of the building and consolidate the signage that is available for that building and the property in general to make it more uniform and bring it more into compliance and, quite frankly, a better looking sign package, if you will, for the property. We have 3 signs that we would like to have approved.
These are 3 pole signs, right?
They are, yes, they are 1 pole sign that would be in front of the professional building along Route 202. And then we have 2 other internal directory signs or monument signs within the property that will help us to identify tenants and where they are located within the property, specifically the professional building in general.
Just a correction, that 1 pole sign will not be along Route 202. It'll be internal as you pull into the driveway of the shopping center.
Sorry, that is correct.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you, Denise.
Give me that again. I'm sorry. I don't think I understand that because I do see a.
All 3 are going to be internal. That's in the driveway as you're going into the shopping center.
Okay. So this is not going to be in this location on 202.
That will be next to the building at the entry drive into the property.
Okay, so so if you're on 202, let's say coming from the townhouse, you're making a left, it's going to be right there.
Correct.
As opposed to in the center of the building, it looks like on 202.
Right.
And has the Architectural Review Board approved that location of the sign, or are they aware of that location of the sign?
Yes, we have a letter of endorsement from them, sir.
Okay.
And in addition to these 3 signs, there will also be a wall sign on the building?
Yes, that is currently existing, and that will stay there.
It's just going to be replaced with an up. The original site plan had 2 wall signs. 1 wall sign's coming down, and the other wall sign will remain. It's just being redone.
Yes.
Okay, which wall sign is being removed?
I'm sorry, sir?
Which wall sign will be removed from the building, please?
It would be the wall sign at the opposite end of the building from 202. It is
That would be more so from the parking lot side?
It would be
versus
from,
202?
yes, you would see that from the internal CVS parking lot. It's currently right up here on the center, up just below the gable of the building. And we would be removing that one permanently.
Is that where it says Gary Lerman?
I'm sorry?
Gary, where it says the Gary Lerman?
Yes, sir.
That one's going to be removed.
That will be removed.
Okay.
The one directory facing the DeChico's building would remain as one of the approved wall signs. And the proposed internal directory that you see in the rendering here would be replacing directory for that building and the tenants in that.
Now, when you say internal directory, do you mean internally lit?
No, it will be, this will be an internally lit illuminated box sign. When I say internal directory, I mean it will be within the confines of the property and for the people who are already within the shopping center to kind of wayfinding to identify the tenant they're looking for is in that professional building.
So what's going to be on the Route 202 side? There are about 4 signs there now.
It will. It has enough spaces to accommodate the number of tenants that would be within the professional building, and it only identifies those tenants. With the new DeChico's building and the proximity of it to the road, you have very little time or ability to see anything that might be on the building by the front directory. The existing wall sign that would remain at the I believe it would be the west-facing entrance, okay, is almost impossible to pick up on and identify as you're coming into town from the high school direction. Because the Chico's building, you are at or through the intersection before you could know or identify the tenant you're looking for in the building.
Now, on the 202 side, there are 3 signs in the front there. One is, I believe, for the dentist, one is, I believe, for rental purposes, and one at the very, very top, I believe it says the Somers Professional Building. What's going to happen with those 3 signs, please?
Those signs will be removed, and they will be replicated on this pole sign in front.
All 3 of those signs will be removed?
Yes, sir.
So it seems like to me, the only sign that will remain on the building is where it says Town Center Professional Building, and then we're going to have 3 pole signs, period. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
And all the other signs on the building are going to be removed, per ARB, it's a review.
Correct. The directory, the one wall sign will remain next to the name identifying the building.
Okay,
And
so that directory on the building is going to stay.
That will stay. It's currently there, and it will be the one allowed wall sign for the building.
So when you're looking from CVS, I see that there's one sign in front of the building, you know, on the side of the building, so to speak, and then there's another directory sign going up that ramp on the back of the building. Is that my understanding?
Yes, there will be this internal sign, directory sign that will identify the upper and or lower tenants.
Right. And all these signs are internally lit? They're box light signs?
The only sign that is not illuminated is the one allowed wall sign that will be replaced or updated on the building itself. That is correct.
The Architectural Review Board didn't want any spotlight lit signs, they all wanted internally lit?
That is correct.
Is there any work being planned on the building in general? Any renovation, any siding? 'Cause it's always been a bit of an eyesore.
Yes, and this is the first step to improving that, stripping the signage off and cleaning up the building. We plan on painting that building and replacing shutters. We've already gone through last year and replaced all of the windows on the first and second floor, and this will be the next step for that renovation.
These 3 freestanding signs, they all each have 6 slots. The same 6 tenants will be in each of the 3 signs?
Yes, sir.
seems a bit much. Seems a bit much to me.
Does seem to be a little redundant, doesn't it?
Especially because the internal sign by the ramp and the one by the entrance to CVS, those are within only a few feet of each other.
Yeah, because if you're looking at CVS, you're going to see two directories of the same thing.
Yes.
I'm not sure I know understand the point of that.
Well, the idea of the freestanding sign in the island is to identify the tenants in that building before you actually pass the building and then have to exit or circle around and re-enter the property, because you will be past that. You'll be past actually the entrance to the parking area by the time you would see the wall directory sign, and it would be too late. You would have to exit the property and return back in to find the tenant that you're looking for. Once you've pulled in to the parking area and you're walking towards the building, you'll be able to identify whether or not the tenant is on an upper level to go up and access the second floor, or if you need to be staying on ground level and entering on the first floor of the building.
Now, if I remember correctly, with the new traffic pattern that has been established, the majority of the traffic is going to be going in front of the Chico's, in front of their building, and cutting across. Now, either you're going to go perfectly straight across, or you're going to make yourself a right-hand turn regarding the sign in the island. Who's really going to see that?
Well, if you're coming straight across the intersection we'll call it the connecting intersection from DeChico's, you will pass by this sign and you will be able to identify the tenant and turn into the parking area there at the south end of the professional building and park.
Now, because it's not where I want to disagree with you, but if you're there at that stop line, you're going to be looking for traffic, more so looking for the sign on your right-hand side. Okay, you're going to be looking for traffic. Now, I really don't think that sign's going to really benefit the area for the professional building in that one particular location.
Well, if you're traveling through the intersection from DeChico's to our property, the sign is actually on your left when you're looking at the professional building, and you'll be able to see the tenants in there and turn into that parking field immediately after the sign. You'll be able to make a left turn into that parking field.
Now, I can see, personally, I can see if the sign was in a different angle coming into versus being parallel with the, with the road there, with the entrance.
Yes, that may benefit the people coming from the Chico's, but you still have the same volume of traffic that will be entering and transiting through the center from both the Route 100 entrance, traveling through the center and out towards the DeChico intersection on 202, and you'll also be adding at some hopefully soon future date, you will be also adding the traffic from the condominium complex that we have agreed to provide an access road from those condo complexes onto the south end of our property. So you will significantly increase the volume of traffic that will be directly approaching this sign, and they will need to know they need to turn into this parking field, otherwise they fall into the same trap where they get to 202 and they just have the wall sign and it's too late.
Now, based on the current information you gave me about that, I want to say the new drive, yes, now I can understand your point of view, why you want to have that sign at that location. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And the tenants in this building it's generally professional offices, or?
Yes, yeah.
So they would be open during normal business hours for the most part?
That is correct, yes, sir.
So you might say an internally lit directory sign might be overkill, because they probably wouldn't, not a lot of activity there at night, I would imagine.
I cannot speak for all the tenants in there, and we do have vacancies in that building. One of the reasons being nobody can find them, and it has detracted from leasing some of those offices. We currently have a potential lease with a veterinary tenant that would be on that first floor. Their hours, at this point, I'm not exactly certain. They may actually look for some kind of, nighttime hours for emergency type of veterinary services. And so we really can't plan for only 9 to 5 business operation there.
This sign on 202,
Yes, sir.
I'm still a little confused. Is that sign going to be in between this building and the exit road from the shopping center? It's not going to be on the median in between the entrance and the exit here.
No, sir. It has to be some distance from the exiting lanes out of our shopping center, because if it's too close to that corner, we will run into problems with sight lines and turning, for the traffic maneuvers exiting the property.
So does this sign sit between the building and 202, just further to the intersection?
It's going to, well, yes, building, Route 202 here.
Right.
And it will be as close as possible to the physical building. And it's shown a little bit centered on the building because of the issue of sight lines for people exiting the property. We may have some flexibility with, sliding it either east or west a little bit, but it cannot be too close to that entrance.
Because I'm
because of
thinking about
safety
sight
cons-
lines, right?
Yeah, safety concerns.
I think it's going to go there.
I don't think it's going to be on this median. I think it's going to be closer over here. I almost think I need to see a site plan on this, where these signs are, because I don't think we're clear exactly where these pole signs are.
For this particular sign,
For that particular sign, yes. I don't know. I don't know what the other board members think. I'm a little confused as to actually where these signs are located on the property, and once we approve these, they're done. So I want to know exactly where these signs are, and I personally still think there's a little bit of a redundancy on one side of the building here. I don't know how the other members think about that.
Yeah, the two signs from the parking lot where the ramp is going.
And all these signs are internally lit? They're all
but,
illuminated.
all but the wall signs, sir.
Right, but the 3 pole signs are internally lit.
Correct. And this is, I don't know, the rendering gives this the impression that it's larger than it is, but this sign is 4 feet tall. So we're not talking about a tremendous, structure here. It's 48 inches tall from the plant bed that it's sitting in, and it's less than 3 feet wide. So in the photograph, it's a little bit deceptive, and that's why we included the dimensions so that you could have, an idea of what was really being presented. And quite frankly, it's almost smaller, or it's shorter than this corkboard.
Now, to help clarify the chair's, trying to understand where the sign's going to be, with this diagram here,
Yes, sir.
okay, is it going to go in the island in between the entrance and the exit, or is it going to be going from the exit side closer to the building?
No, it's going where they've got it.
I'm not
Okay.
sure I understand the question.
Okay. With this picture right here,
Yes, sir.
okay, you have a small little island here, you have the car coming in, and you have a car going out.
Correct.
Is it sign going to go from on this side, or is it going to go into the island? That's my question.
Sir, this sign that we're
No,
asking.
the front, no, the sign in the front of
Let's
202.
talk about the sign on 202.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. This sign you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. This sign is on you cannot see it, but the island that you're referring to, or that you're denoting,
Right.
is actually hidden behind the sign.
Correct.
You can see just the end of that lane division, or the island dividing the inbound and outbound lanes,
Right.
in
Right.
the distance behind it.
Right.
So it is going to, in this image, the location favors the eastern end, or the eastern half of this east-west, the north-facing side of the building. It's more to the east of this north-facing side that faces 202.
All right, now, based on...
Is that?
So it's
was
not
I
in the
clear?
island?
Not in the
It is
island.
not in the island.
Okay.
It's not in the roadway. It's, in this picture, the building is about, I would estimate the building is probably about 40 feet long, okay, maybe 50 feet long. The northern face of the building is about, I would say, approximately 50 feet wide. It is in the eastern third, if you will, of that length of the building. So you're at least probably 30 feet from the corner of the building, then you're another 20 feet or more from there to the actual island that divides the roadway that you're referring to.
Okay, thank you.
And is this sign one-sided or two-sided?
It is two-sided, sir.
And it's perpendicular to the building?
Yes, sir, that is correct. So that people traveling east and west on 100 can, I'm sorry, on 202.
On 202.
Yes, sir. Can see, the tenants in that building, and with enough time to prepare to turn in to the property.
Is this sign that's in this island in the back of the building, is that a single-sided sign or a double-sided sign?
That's supposed to be a single-sided sign, because once you're in the parking area, you don't really need to utilize this sign. You would have the smaller second directory at the ramp where you're walking toward the building from the parking area,
Yeah.
and you could identify your tenant, the person you're going to see as an upper level tenant or a lower level tenant, and proceed into the building.
Because this sign on Route 202, it is 10 feet tall, and its surface area, if we're to box it off, is 6 by 6, 6 feet by 6 feet. That's 36 square feet of sign. And once again, I'm just thinking about sight lines on this
Correct.
for the location of the sign.
The overall, I will point out the overall height of the sign from the ground to the peak of the gable, or the peak in the middle of the sign. Yes, it is 10 feet. However, the ground, or the elevation that the sign is being measured from, is about 3 to 4 feet lower than Route 202. So when you're in a vehicle, the sign is not 10 feet tall. It's actually more appropriately at eye level, because it starts 3 to 4 feet below the elevation of the roadway next to it. The grade slopes down from 202 to a retaining wall, and this retaining wall is about 2 feet tall, that it drops to the elevation where the sign would be installed. So it isn't 10 feet tall in relation to 202, if that helps with the understanding of this.
I have to say, I like the additional touch of the elephants on the very, very top of all these signs, the two signs inside the parking lot.
Yeah,
I like that.
We've worked extensively with the Architectural Review Board. Like I said, this started with our application back in June of this year.
Now, based on what I see, they will be definitely carved.
Yes.
Carved.
It will be The black metal where the sign or the identifier is here, the name,
Right.
that will be cut out of a black metal panel with white, like Lexan, an opaque Lexan plastic film behind. That will be the elephant, and the name will be backlit or internally illuminated with the signs as well.
Okay, now, thank you very much for explaining that, but I'm sorry if I misled you. I was referring to the ones inside the parking lot. These two.
Yes, these two signs, yes. My understanding is that is the same effect, so that in the evening, at dusk, at, 4 or 5 o'clock in the winter when it's dark, you will have that name illuminated with the tenant's panels.
Okay, but the elephants will definitely be carved out, correct? Based on what I'm seeing?
They will, yes.
Okay.
They will be, they are not a raised feature. It is a flat metal panel that has that design cut through it with a white backer behind it that will illuminate the white elephant and the name of the building. So it'll be a flat face to that sign.
Thank you.
So the face of these signs are all illuminated, except the letters will be dark on top of that?
Yes, I'm not really certain of the individual tenants' graphics, if you will. They won't be just black letters on white. If that's allowed, I'm sure that they'll want to have a little bit of their own font and color to set themselves apart. Unless that becomes a requirement of the approval that it's only black letters on white.
The Architectural Review Board discussed the font being the same.
Okay.
And
all the tenants in the
it's
building.
going to be all consistent, so there's not a hodgepodge of all different signs.
Did the ARB talk at all about externally lighting the sign with spots or something like that, as opposed to having light boxes?
They did, and the reason they agreed with this is if you look in the memo that came from the ARB, it says, with regard to illumination at night, the white letters appear black and the black letters appear white, giving it a very subtle appearance. Wing Biddle, the owner of Erstad Biddle, shared with them night pictures of other signs that he has in Greenwich and several areas in Connecticut, and the Architectural Review Board was okay with the lighting. It's not going to be that in-your-face, really bright,
Yeah, because
like
I mean, if you
we've talked about with some other applications.
because I mean, signs look very stark when they're just a light box,
Right.
and then you like print letters on top of it, and you have this
Yep.
big white thing, and especially when we have 3 of these directory signs around it.
Yep.
I almost wish you had brought the stats or some pictures of what the sign will look like at night when it's illuminated in a site plan.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I was not.
Just so
I
we
was
have
not
more
told.
information on this.
I did not, have a request.
Is this building allowed 1 pole sign or 2? Because it,
The original site plan for that building existed before the shopping center was even built.
Right.
And the original site plan only allowed for 2 wall signs. One that they're replacing now and the other one on the other side.
and
That's all.
no pole signs.
And no pole signs.
Yeah, because I mean, if with 1 road frontage, aren't you usually allowed 1 building sign and 1 pole sign?
It doesn't go by the type of sign, it just goes by the number of signs.
Yeah, I know, Tom, if you,
It varies by district also.
right,
Yeah, so
right. So we're approving at least 2 extra pole signs, maybe 3, over what the code allows here.
Well, they can have 4, they can have 2, they're ultimately asking for 3. So, 2 above what they can have.
You're talking about 2 pole signs?
Well, part of the problem is that the original site plan only approved 2 wall signs.
Yeah.
So.
And
there's-
no pole signs.
And no pole signs, right?
Right.
So they're keeping a wall sign, getting rid of a wall sign, but 3 pole signs.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our biggest struggles with either finding tenants to lease office space in there or retaining them is simply the fact that nobody can find them. And by the time they would, if they were lucky enough to turn in and have time at that Route 202 entry to drive real slow to see the wall-mounted sign, then they'll be successful in finding where the tenant is that they want to go to. Otherwise, they drive by and they see just this building, and they don't really know that that's even a part of the shopping center in many respects.
Right.
So
I think we certainly want to assist in making the building, you know, visible and known, and who's in there,
Yeah.
clear for everybody.
Well,
But, you know, the only question I have is, I'm not sure I completely understand and visually see all the placement of these signs and what they're going to look like when they're up.
okay.
I don't know how other board members think on this. Other comments?
I mean, I understand the need to identify the building as the town center professional building, and that would go a long way to helping those tenants. If somebody said, I'm in the town center professional building, and they were assigned, I mean, I understand that. It's rare to see monument signs that are somewhat directional in nature be internally lit inside a parking lot. So I don't feel that that's necessary to have another lit sign there. Covering both sides of the building, as you do here, north and south, with a lit sign. I mean, I understand the reasoning. It's a lot to approve in excess of what's allowed. I mean, you know, you're going to have this sign here is coming down.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Which leaves the end of that building completely bare. And again, you're left at the Route 202 entrance drive to see your tenant on the wall sign by the door that is not lit.
Right. Once you're
if
you're driving, once you're seeing the sign, you're essentially leaving the shopping center, I guess.
You can see that clearly from the drive lane that the perspective of the photograph is taken. You're standing basically along the right shoulder of the drive lane in front of CVS as you would be exiting the property.
Right.
So you were able to identify the building and the tenant before you get past that intersection where you miss your chance to enter the parking field and park. And we think it's really essential because human nature, unless you really have to be there or go to that person for something, you're just looking for someone. If you miss it, odds are you might just go out the entrance and go somewhere else. You may not take the time to circle the entire property, come back in at Route 100, or take a left to try and get out, making a left turn to circle back through the DeChico's parking lot. You know, we think it's critical that it's very clear. One, there's a lot of traffic in that center, and having clear, obvious signage would also help just from a safety standpoint, because people aren't driving around focused more on finding a sign and then trying to figure out how to get back to the building. They can see it in time to have enough distance or whatever to make the maneuvers necessary to get into the parking.
You know, if I step back and look at this, though, we have 3 exterior directory signs, and then we have a 4th directory sign on the building. I don't think I've ever seen a building in Somers with 4 directory signs on it. It just seems like a lot to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and I give a lot of deference to the Architectural Review Board when they review these things, but this is one instance where I think I'm disagreeing. Okay. I mean, I don't know how the other members think.
Can you clarify this sign for me?
Yes, ma'am.
Will this is going to have the names of the tenants? Is
Correct.
it also going to have their suite numbers, or is it going to have arrows? How is this going to provide extra direction than the outside sign?
I'm not sure if that was
Arrows.
just arrows for upper level
Arrows.
and lower level.
Yeah, arrows directing them to where they are.
Are all 6 signs the same on all 3? Are all 6 panels the same on all 3 signs?
Yes. Yes, because we're trying to give people coming either to the center up or down Route 202, or people passing through the property from one end to the other, transiting through, enough time and enough opportunity to see where the tenant is that they're looking for, or the business, and then go to the building before they've driven right past it.
But if I'm going to see a person and I see the person's panel sign All I have to do is park and go find this, it's in the building someplace.
Well, yes, and that that's correct. But if you're not addressing the traffic flow from the various different directions that people can either pass by the building or come to and from out of the property, you're still at a disadvantage, because you may come in from a direction that there is no sign. So now you've exited the property, or you've gotten to a point where you have to turn around somehow because you've gotten to the one sign allowed, and it's too late. You're now sitting at the intersection at Route 202, and then you have to figure out what to do next. Whether you got to figure out circling the property, or decide, quite frankly, whether you even want to bother. You know.
Now, how many tenants are upstairs and how many tenants are downstairs, please?
There's currently 3 each, I believe.
That's the maximum that the building can hold, 3 at the upper level and 3 on the lower level?
Yeah, reasonably, because otherwise the configuration of the building and the common stairway connecting the front and the back of the building, or the east and west of the building, makes it really impractical to chop up or divide.
Right. Now, the reason why I'm asking is because with this sign here, okay?
Yes, sir.
With the business name, can it be where it's on upper level or lower level to help alleviate the other sign by the ramp?
We feel that we don't want to have too much for people to absorb at one time while they're still behind the wheel driving around the shopping center. We feel that it's enough that, that this sign clearly identify the tenant, so that they know where they need to initially go and park. Once they're out of their car and they're safely walking towards the building, they can take time to read a smaller sign and say, oh, okay, that's where they are. I need to go downstairs, or I need to go upstairs. If you try and add all that language onto a sign that they have to read while they're driving, it may not be very beneficial to them. It may not be helpful. Or it could just be a distraction, because they're spending time reading fine print when all they need to see is the name of that tenant. Okay, that's where they are. That's where I need to go. Once they're out of the car, they can refine their search to an upper or lower level occupancy.
Thank you.
So we have a couple of options here. I might make the suggestion that maybe we want to take a look at the site. I think I'd like you to come back. If I were to make a recommendation, I think I'd like you to come back with a site plan that I can see exactly where these signs are on the site plan, and maybe some diagrams, building elevations, anything that you gave to the Architectural Review Board, I would like to see, because to me, I just think this is a lot of signage.
Those pictures, those nighttime pictures would be helpful as well, I think.
I think so. And I also think, too, I mean, I don't know what the board's going to do. I'm just one vote. But if we asked you to remove at least one of the pole signs, which one would you remove? Because right now, I don't know that I'm happy with 3 of them there, and a directory sign in the building. Like I said, there's 4 directory signs on this building. I don't know if a building of this size, I mean, this seems like more signage than we approved for the DeChico's application. And that's a tremendously big building.
And
exactly. It's a big, obvious building that only needs one sign.
Right.
You know what it is, you know where it is, and it's obvious what that building is. Here you have a nondescript, plain 2-story building.
But we have a lot of professional buildings in the town of Somers here, and if we're going to give 3 or 4 directory signs for every single building, I think it's just going to be a jumbled mess. I don't know what the other board members think.
And Vic, as a reminder, if we're going to do that, all the submissions have to be turned into me no later than 10 days before the meeting,
Okay.
please.
Yeah, so any additional items you want to submit, if we're to adjourn this to the next meeting, have to be submitted 10 days before the meeting. Just be aware of that.
What would be the items? Site plan, identifying the location of them, some kind of nighttime rendering of them illuminated?
Yes, if you have elevations of the building, so I could see where the building signs would be. I'm sure these all had to be submitted to ARB. I think we'd like to get a feel for what these signs look like during the day and at night, where they physically are. And it'll give us, the board, the opportunity to go over there and just walk the site and just take another look.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding was that the renderings, the renderings provided here is what was worked out, presented and worked out with the ARB and then subsequently approved by them.
The ARB did not have a site plan and they did not have elevations.
Okay. I think we need to see something on this, though.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is that it doesn't seem like anybody has real support for approving these three, so you might want to.
Okay. Well, I would.
I mean, you
not-
have to demonstrate to us the need, where they're going. We have to get comfortable with it, or we're not going to approve it. I mean, I think, at least I'm not going to vote for it.
Okay. As far as the need, I have a half.
Well, you've explained that.
I have a half-vacant building that's been that way for the last 10, 15 years. Since I've been working with our company for 17 and a half years, the building has never been fully occupied. 17 and a half years.
When was the last time it was painted?
That's vinyl siding. It was never painted.
When was the last time the vinyl siding was replaced? I mean, there are other, what I'm trying to, I'm getting at,
longer than 17 years ago.
There are other factors involved. It's not the only reason.
It's not just
size. Yeah, and improving the aesthetics of the building is our goal, and this is really kind of the first step, is getting the signage off of it and placed, positioned appropriately so that it's beneficial to not only the tenants that are there, prospective tenants, and the shoppers or the customers that would want to visit these tenants, these businesses.
Now, I do have one additional question here. Now, you mentioned that, which I do not have, I don't know if anybody else has, the entrance off of the current entrance, okay?
202, that?
202, sir?
Yeah, you showed us a picture of the signage that will be on the building itself, at the entrance.
If...
Now, my question is, where the ramp side, is there going to be...
Are you referring to this, sir?
No, the one...
The wall sign?
The wall sign, yes.
Yes, sir.
Now, in the sense of there's going to be a wall sign there. Now, on the ramp side, is there going to be an additional signage similar to that?
Well, the sign there will be nothing on the building, but this directory sign, okay, that's in the plant bed next to the ramp, is the same size as the wall sign proposed that we're replacing the existing. The wall sign is actually this is smaller. The wall sign here that we're replacing the existing is 3 foot by 4 foot. This sign is 30 inches by 4 feet.
Now, based on your explanation of the signage.
Yes, sir.
With the sign that's in the parking lot itself, in the sense of which way to go, why do you need the additional sign on the building itself at that entrance?
Well, you actually have an entrance to the building here.
Which you'd have one in the back too.
You have
where the ramp is.
You have a combination of a lower level entry into the hallway, the common hallway, and then the ramp serves the upper level tenants in the common hallway.
So theoretically, what you're saying is the main entrance, even though it's in the entrance and exit, more people use the one by the ramp to enter the building for safety's sake?
Generally speaking, yes. We do have plenty of tenants that come in and out through this front entrance, and their clients or customers or whatever, their patrons, also utilize this entrance as well. It's not quite as heavily trafficked, just because of its proximity to that exit drive. It's kind of right there. but we're trying to call out the tenants in here, not only for people that are walking along the sidewalk to get in, but as you pull in to the shopping center from, say, the west, making a right-hand turn in, you can look to your left, see the directory there, and identify that as the location you need to go.
By the way, that photograph you're holding in your hand, we don't have that as part of our package.
Correct,
Right, we don't.
because it wasn't part of the application.
Right. I think, though, we need to see all the photos of the building so that we can...
That's the only one you don't have.
Okay. So
Now-
any other photos you have, I think we need to see the whole building, all the photos, so we can see what's going on with this property, with the signs.
Now, based on what I see here too, in the sense of sidewalk in the front of the main entrance, all I see with this one picture is painted lines on the asphalt to maybe simulate a walkway. I'd like to have that cleared up too, whether or not
I'm sorry,
there
are
is
you
a-
referring to this picture?
No, this one.
Oh, okay. Well, and I'm sorry, what was your question?
Okay, right here,
Yeah.
okay? Is that just painted lines on asphalt, or is that a raised walkway?
I'm sorry.
Right here. Let me get my bearings.
Yeah.
Okay, right here. Right along here. Is that a raised
Along
walkway?
the front face, the west face of the building?
Yeah.
Okay, that is
Like an unloading zone?
it's a crosshatched crosswalk that connects there's an opening in the beds here, and it connects the walkway from this parking field down the western face of the building. It is only line striping and
Right.
against the building. That we do that because you have handicap parking stalls that are over here. You can see the blue cross hatching going across to connect to this walkway denoted.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You know, I think further a site plan would lay that type of information out, which is what
Right.
I think we need to see.
Okay, I just want, if I could have you clarify your last request for elevation, pictures of each side of the building?
I'd like to see the side of the building and where additional signs on the building are going to go. So I think we need a site plan to
well,
show where
there
the
are-
pole signs are going to be, and then the signs on the building.
Okay, so there are no other signs on the building except for this sign that is not part of the application, that's a replacement of what's allowed.
Okay, the ARB, though, also mentioned that there will be a town center professional building sign over the first floor main entrance.
This is existing, and
That's what's over the main entrance right there,
That is-
plus the directory sign there.
yes, you're
I'd like
simply,
to get that picture in part of our packet.
okay,
Okay,
that would be fine, even though it's not a part of the application?
yes,
Okay,
correct. And then the site plan, as discussed, with the signs laid out.
okay.
Exactly where they are.
So, okay, so you're looking for a full site plan submittal then? Is that, or just,
I want to see a site plan for the property.
okay,
I've got to see where everything's laid out on this thing. And I also want to give the board an opportunity to revisit the site so that we can try to visualize where these signs are going to be and if they're necessary.
Before they come the next time.
Yeah, before they come next, yes. Before next month's meeting, we will take a look at the
okay.
site.
And Denise, I'm sorry, December 11th?
December 18th.
18th is the deadline?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, December 18th is the name
No,
of the...
December 18th is the meeting.
Yeah.
The deadline would be Friday, December 7th, 4:30 PM.
Oh, 7th,
My
I'm sorry.
office.
Okay.
I mean, I think in doing that, I mean, we've all got some concerns about the number, the quantity of signs here.
Yeah.
And how far above what's allowed that is. So, rather than, I mean, submitting more pictures is good, but also, I don't know if you want to consider that in terms of your
I'd have
plan.
to
You
defer to
come
the
back and
president
ask
of the
for the
company.
same thing, yeah.
He's worked for 6 months now with the town on this, and I'd have to let him, you know, make that decision or present his argument to you guys at the next meeting.
You may want to think about maybe eliminating one of these signs or more, I don't know.
Okay.
You may want to think about that, okay?
All right. Thank you very much.
Any other comments of the applicant at this point in time? Before I let you go, is there anybody here in the audience who wishes to speak in regard to this application? No? Okay, sir.
All right.
Oh, you have,
I would like to just say something.
If you could please come up to the microphone, give us your name and address.
I'm Linda Calamari. I live in Mayapack. I don't even live over here. But as far as the signs go, I mean, one sign that says the name of the building, and then when you get in there, then you have different directions of where the parking lot is, and then people know where they're going. I don't think you have to put all that good doctor this one, doctor that one, all on that one thing when you pull in. Just everybody knows they're going to that particular building. Then when you get in there, you find out where you go. That's how we do it up in Mayapack.
And internal directory, I understand. Okay.
That's it.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, sir, so we will, I think we've given you some requests of the board.
Yep.
If you could comply, and we'll take a look at the site in the meantime between then, and we'll speak to you next month.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next item on the agenda this evening is that of Carol Miller. This is an area variance application for a special exception use permit to construct an accessory apartment in an R10 residential district, as well as an application for a special exception use permit to construct an accessory apartment in the basement of an existing one-family dwelling. At the request of the applicant, this item has been adjourned to next month's meeting. Denise, I did want to make one request on this application. This is an application for an accessory use apartment in an R10 district when the code requires an R40. I'd like to just know if there has ever been such an application before us before. I don't recall one, but I would like to know if you can find any town history on it or any other applications that you know of. I'd appreciate that. Okay? All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is number 3, that of Paul and Angela Tedesco. This is an application for an area variance on the height of a portion of a property line fence located in an R80 residential district at 10 Windsor Road, Yorktown Heights. Sir, if you could just give us your name and address and briefly describe your application for us.
Sure. My name is Paul Tedesco. I'm at 10 Windsor Road, Yorktown Heights. This is the address in question. The application is for an area variance to allow for a portion of the fence to be higher than 6 feet. In fact, up to 8 feet.
Right, 6 feet is allowed by code. Anything above that, you have to come before us.
Yep.
How much of the fence do you want above 8 feet?
Following revisions, it looks like approximately 320 feet in length will be 8 feet, and the remaining 64 feet in length would be 6 feet.
And it looks like your property abuts Route 6.
Correct.
Okay, could you tell me why you want the...
Sure. There's a lot of noise and also the lighting coming toward the house. And over the years, we're living there almost 17 years now, and for the better part of 10 years, it was tolerable, but following the storms we've had, trees have come down, shrubbery has just dissipated, and we are now more exposed, and so the noise has increased over time, as well as the view and the lighting coming toward the house.
And is there an existing fence there now?
Correct.
Okay, is that the 8-foot fence that's in? Is it?
No, that's an old wooden 6-foot fence.
This is an old wooden 6-foot fence. You're replacing this fence.
Correct.
With the 8-foot and probably some part 6
Correct.
feet, depending on the terrain and how you want to do it.
Correct.
I see. You are right on Route 6, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay. How big is your lot? It looks like it's about 2 acres, is that correct?
Approximately 2 acres,
A
correct.
little over 2 acres, looks like 89,000 square feet, okay. On either side of you, are those residential homes?
Yes.
Okay. And you're only looking for the fence on the side of your property that abuts Route 6?
Correct.
Okay. Pursuant to a plan, it looks like there's a conservation easement between your house and Route 6?
Yes.
Okay.
Not sure why.
It's still your property, but...
It is, yes.
But it's somehow protected for some reason. Okay.
Do any of the neighbors have fences along their property lines that abut Route 6?
Yes, in fact, the neighbor to the east of where my property is does have the same type of fencing abutting Route 6. I'm not sure how high that fence is. I think it's 6 feet in his case. And I guess the elevation and sloping where his property is different. So when you're there, you don't see any of the traffic. But from where I am, it slopes downward, and so you get a lot of the traffic and the noise.
Okay, thank you.
And then the other side of you, of course, you're on Windsor Road, which is a much quieter road, obviously, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for the applicant at this point in time? Did you have any other comments for us, sir, in regard to this?
No, thank you.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay.
The replacement fence is gonna look exactly like this one picture, just a little bit taller.
Correct. I believe that might be the 8-foot portion,
Oh, this is the,
thereabouts, correct. It's got the third rail in the middle.
And this is a vinyl fence?
Yes.
Okay. So is part of the fence in place right now at 8 feet?
No.
No.
Whatever we have now is the old fence, and that's just 6
And that's
feet.
all going to be replaced along the whole line?
Replaced and removed, correct.
Okay, replaced and removed, okay. So what is this a picture of then?
It's just a sample.
A sample of what the fence would look like?
Yes, right.
I see, I see. Okay. I assume this is going to be a nice sturdy fence that you're going to have to redo it and everything else, right?
Correct.
Obviously? Okay. Any other comments of the applicant before I go to the public? Is there anybody here who wishes to speak in regard to this application? Any comments, questions? No? Sir, did you have any other questions or any
No
other?
questions. Just want to thank everyone for their time.
Any other questions in regard to the applicant?
no.
We ready to vote on this matter? Okay. Can we have a motion as to the type of action?
I'll make a motion type 2.
Second. Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Can we have a motion whether we're going to grant the application or deny?
I'll make a motion to grant the application.
Second.
Ms. DiPolito?
Aye.
Mr. Gio?
Aye.
Mr. Harden?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Santoroni?
Aye.
Chairman Canestra?
Aye.
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir, your application is granted.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda this evening is that of Kayla Choquette and David Potter. This is a carryover from the previous monthly meeting. This is an application for a special exception use permit to construct an accessory apartment on the second floor of a barn, as well as an area variance because the barn is being constructed after 1992, and this is located in an R80 district. I think we should probably consider this application with, of course, the application number 5. This is also an application for a special exception use permit to allow for 4 additional horses above the 2 that are permitted, for a total of 6 located in the R80 residential district. Is there someone here to speak in regard?
Hello, Mr. Canestra. Don Rossi is my name. I'm an attorney from Hogan and Rossi in Brewster, and as the board knows, coming on a little bit late in the game here. So wanted to, obviously, any questions the board has from the past submissions. We have not, because we were retained after the last meeting, had an opportunity to comply with your board's 10-day requirement for written submission, so we have not submitted a written memo in reply to Mr. Caruso's memo, but certainly would like to address some of those questions, like to get an idea as to how the board and the town attorney view those, and discuss the project with the hope of getting this approved. So with us tonight is Ms. Choquette, also Tim Allen, who's been before the board on the project before, is also here. So if Tim can make his way through, would like to put up a board with the map and also with a overhead of the area.
Sure, that would be fine. Mr. Allen's
I'll
gonna
send
come
a
forward.
messenger up to get Mr. Allen in the back.
Sure, that's fine.
I'll go.
That's fine.
Okay, so given the board's contact with the project in the past, also understanding that the public hearing on the accessory apartment has already been closed, I'd like to just go over the plan very briefly and emphasize to the board. Yep. The photo. All right. Emphasize at the outset some of the basics. In the R80 zone, we have a private farm that is being proposed, a special exception use permit application for the keeping of 6 horses, where the code with a special use permit would permit up to 11 horses. We have a piece of property that allows for the active horse operation, for want of a better word, to be situated well removed from the road, very far distant from other residences, as the overhead will show when I flip this map over. And we have some conditions that have already been agreed to by the applicant that I think should, in conjunction with the provisions of the code and any other conditions your board might think appropriate, would ensure that this use is going to be exactly what is intended under the code, and that is an accessory use to a single-family residence with the for the use of the occupant of the house. So I believe that in the residence district we have a use that's compatible, and we have shown already, and we'll certainly discuss other conditions to ensure that there will be no adverse impacts on the neighborhood. One thing I would also like to state at the outset, Tim Allen from Bibbo Associates, as you know, very experienced local engineer with a lot of experience in designing horse farms. I believe that the board should feel very comfortable that matters such as drainage, stormwater flows, and septic issues have been appropriately designed. Those are matters that the building department will obviously pass on, some of which have already been passed on. I believe some engineering review has occurred. But those are all matters that I think the board can have great comfort in. Now I'm going to flip it, Tim, if we could.
Yeah, I would like to make mention also that from the last meeting, I believe all the members of the board have visited the site.
Great.
Walked through the house and the property to get a feel for the terrain and the size of the property, and so I think we're all pretty familiar with it.
Great. And also, I know concerns have already been expressed, but Kayla is a veterinarian. She's actively involved in the veterinarian practice. Yep. Not going to work. Yeah, sorry if it's not so visible. If anybody has any problems looking at it, they certainly can come up and at the board's pleasure and take a look at things. But very importantly, and of great concern to us in this part of the country and certainly in Somers, is the level and intensity of this use. This is going to be private. Kayla has 4 horses that are basically retirement horses that would be kept here. This is not going to be a commercial stable. There will not be constant vehicle trips of boarders and their children or their trainers coming to the site. There won't be any horse shows. There won't be any outdoor illumination of paddocks. There won't be any loudspeakers. So it'll be purely personal, and that will be a commitment and a condition placed on the farm. Would encourage your board to impose that as part of its resolution. Also, with regard to the accessory apartment, Kayla has already committed that it will not be a rental property. Her mom, who's with us tonight, the intention is for her to reside in the accessory apartment, effectively making it almost an extension of the single-family use on the property. It will be used either by her or by someone who might be employed on the farm, because on a property such as this, with horses, for safety, for security reasons, it makes good sense and it's a good practice to have someone living on the farm. But it will not be rented out to a caretaker, will not be rented out to a third party. It will be someone employed or a member of her family. And I think those are things that speak very heavily for the fact that the use is compatible with the district and the neighborhood. There are a number of issues that have been raised with regard to the accessory apartment. We have your code includes the provision, as you're well aware, that the building has to be constructed after 1992 for an accessory apartment to be permitted.
Before 1992.
What did I say?
You said after 1992.
Okay, so
it has to be
before.
constructed before 1992.
Before
This would be
1992.
constructed area after 1992. Therefore, an extra area variance is required where we can put some conditions such as, you know, we don't want it rented out to outside parties and things like that.
Great. I might continually flip-flop that because I think it's counterintuitive to think it would be that way. I would think it would be ones before 1992 might have more of a problem, but I guess I understand the reasons for it. So that's something that I think speaks very well for that variance. Number two, I want to make sure that it's clear to the board, not just because I'm saying it, but also because Jerry may very well agree, that when we talk about variances of special permit conditions, we're talking about an area variance standard, not use variance standards. That's specifically provided for in town law in section 274B, which essentially balances, I guess, the fact that some uses are held to a more stringent regulation, but the legislature granted relief by saying you only have to meet the area variance standards. So I know it was raised in Mr. Caruso's memo, but I think it's clear. I don't think we have a problem with the GPO overlay district. I think this is an accessory use to a single-family residence, so I believe it's exempt from that. Also, again, we should all take comfort in the fact that all appropriate steps are being taken to deal with groundwater flows from the site. I also don't think we have a situation where we're regulating hazardous waste. Manure, to my knowledge, is not categorized that way by the DEC. And I also don't think we have a use that is the disposal and treatment or processing of solid or liquid waste. I think those, we have, again, an accessory use, a permitted barn building, and therefore I believe we are exempt from those requirements. A horse farm, like a single-family residence, certainly results in solid and liquid waste, but the site is not being used as a place to dispose or process or treat it. I think that would be a sludge disposal area or a landfill or a sewage treatment plant. So I think the spirit and intent of your code is not to regulate a private horse farm on accessory to a single-family dwelling. Those are the basics. I think critical is the private nature of it. Also, from the aerial photo, I think that speaks volumes. This site has natural screening. The house and the barn will be situated further from the road than the house, tucked back into the open area cleared to the right of the house. It's hundreds of feet from the nearest residences. We're sensitive to the potential concerns that the neighbors have, not just potential, but their concerns. But I think every single one of them is addressed in connection with the application and through your code. So obviously, any questions, we're happy to answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of just review what we're looking at here. Of course, we have to decide whether we're going to grant a special exception use permit,
right?
Which, very often they are granted in normal circumstances. However, this is a property built after 1992, so therefore we go into the area variance and we can put conditions on it. Which I think we've addressed a lot of the major conditions I'm sure the board would want, in that we're not going to allow any kind of rental.
Right.
And obviously, there's no business that can be operated on this property. That's not the purpose of it.
Understood, and that's the intention.
Right, and keep in mind, if we, did grant the, well, I'll come to that in a minute. And then as far as the number of horses, generally there's 2 horses per 80,000 square feet and 1 horse per acre thereafter.
Correct.
So if we were to look at both of these properties, there's 11-some acres. So we do understand that also.
And they're both included in the application.
Yeah. So the other point I think I'd like you to address is there's one maybe a little different item of the code where our code says no building used for human habitation shall be used to house domestic animals. Can you address that in some fashion?
I'll address it first maybe by an editorial comment. I think it's an antiquated provision. It's inconsistent with the practice on farm properties everywhere. It is specifically permitted under the state building code, which I think really should be the standard for the town if it is looking at uses that would be appropriate for these type of districts. I know it would be a significant difference if it was a hay storage building and then an apartment. But even that, to my knowledge, is not prohibited. It would just require extensive and very expensive fire separation and other improvements. So where a state building code permits what is arguably a much more hazardous use in one building, I think it might deserve some looking at to potentially through a code amendment that would state that a mixed use of a barn and an apartment on properties of this type would be appropriate. So that's the editorial side. I really don't have an answer for you as far as the legality of it, other than possible past precedent of your board, which I'm not familiar because obviously I don't practice here that regularly. But I'm struck by the fact that if you can't have domestic animals, which in and of itself is a very broad definition to include horses and other types of livestock, but if you can't have domestic animals in the same building with human habitation, you can't have dogs and cats. You can have a couple under the code, but having 4 cats on the property would violate this provision. So I think it's a I don't know what the right term is for it, but I think it would be it's a difficult code provision to enforce, and I think it needs tinkering. We are prepared, because of the amount of controversy with regard to this use, special permit use, to defer your board's decision on the apartment to allow us to apply to you for a variance of that requirement, because we do believe it also is one that's subject to the area variance standards. And based thereon, we would appreciate, despite your having combined it for the purposes of the public hearing and for this hearing, if we could defer a decision on the apartment until we put forth the appropriate application and request the variance, because we want to make sure that we're not, I mean, if your board's inclined to grant it based on past precedent, I don't think that we'd have much of an objection, but we don't want to rely on past precedent alone in the event that any of the objectors who have already retained a lawyer would bring an Article 78 proceeding against it. So we'd rather err on the side of completeness, defer the accessory apartment, allow Kayla to obtain the special permit for the construction of the barn so that she can proceed this building season and into the early spring to address her needs, and then continue the process with regard to the accessory apartment, because I do think this should be airtight both from our point of view and the town's point of view.
So are you saying you're officially withdrawing the special exception use permit for the apartment at this point in time, or do you want us to consider both?
I'd like you to bifurcate. I'd like you to consider the special use permit application for the keeping of horses, which does not have a variance attached to it. Consider that separately, which would be permitted without the apartment, subject to your approval, and then hold the special permit and variance applications for the apartment in abeyance until we can supplement them with an appropriate variance application with regard to the mixed use issue.
Sure, Jerry.
One question. Mr. Rossi, you take that microphone? Take the mic, please. My understanding is my understanding was the application was on an 8-acre parcel. That's what we talked about last month. And there is this extra 3, and you talked about it as if the application is for the whole 11 acres. Is that correct?
It's intended to be for the entire 11 acres.
And is that 11 acres one parcel, or is it 2 tax parcels?
It's 2 separate tax lots.
And does is it going to be merged? Because if you're making an application to use the 11 acres, it may be merged as a matter of law.
It's not the intention of the applicant to consider them being used separately. I'll
I
answer
know
it,
you
Jerry.
don't want
No,
to say it.
I will
but-
answer it. No, what I want to say, the first thing I want to ask is, has a merger already been effected under the code? Because showing it merely as a separate tax lot does not equate necessarily to not having had a merger already occur for zoning purposes. So that's one question.
That would be a question that you should address.
I'll confer with
Yeah.
with Kayla right now.
Because if
to-
you're doing, Mr. Chairman, if you're considering the extra 3 as part of this application, and we're getting variances and special permits, I believe it's probably merged, but I don't know if the applicant understands that they can't go and subdivide, and build a house on the 3-acre lot.
I mean, I guess the intent here is that theoretically on the 3-acre lot, another house could be built, and you get 3 more horses. You know what I'm saying? But the plans that you've provided here seems to look at both lots as one, especially since it looks like there is some fenced-off area on the 3-acre lot to further, have the horses graze or roam or whatever it may be.
It's a proposed paddock. I would say this, just as a general rule, landowners would like to avoid a merger as much as possible. It's a valuable lot. The lot without the adjoining, the lot where the house and the proposed barn are, would still qualify to support 6 horses. So so to force a merger through it is kind of goes against the grain, and I certainly would have to talk to the client about that, but for the paddock that's shown there, which obviously affords a little bit more elbow room for the horses, the lot with the house would qualify for 6 because we would be entitled to go up to 6 on it.
I mean, certainly the extra paddock on the extra 3 acres helps your argument in providing more space available for the horses. But so Jerry, I mean,
I think you might consider it a condition that if you ever were to grant this, because I know there were concerns that the board raised last time about the amount of space for the number of horses, that condition that it is merged could be a condition along with any others you have of granting this, because it runs with, the variances run with the land. They're not special to any person in
the subsequent
America.
owner would have to then abide by the thing, and right.
Correct, and it would make anything you say. You just wouldn't want them coming in for a subdivision and then keeping the horses on the 6. I wouldn't say.
And then
that
theoretically,
anybody would
somebody could build a house on the 3 and have more horses. I mean, theoretically.
I think when you bring an application in like this, then you are acknowledging a merger. But I think that the board should make it a condition. If you're going to grant it.
Now, of course, if the board did make that a condition to merge the 2 properties to get enough space for whatever number of horses the board might approve or not approve, I guess the applicant, could they undo that at some time in the future if they wanted to? If they got rid of all the horses?
Undo a variance, I don't understand how you would do it, but anything's possible in this world. You could bring an application for a subdivision, but then you'd have to go through the planning board, and it wouldn't be utilizing any variance you grant to negate your intent when you're granting it.
Just one comment on that, Mr. Chairman, is that for the horse farm, we wouldn't need any variances. So so there are a couple of ways to address this issue. One is without your question kind of opens the door to all different types of possible scenarios in the future. If Kayla wanted to sell the lot off separately, where your board and the town would have regulatory control over her is because the lot is subject to the special permit. So the currently vacant lot, if incorporated into the special permit, would require, if she ever wanted to sell it separately, for her to come back to your board to amend the special permit so as to eliminate the special permit from that lot.
And maybe
So-
reduce the number of horses or do something else.
Wait,
Can that be done?
or whatever else
You
whatever
know,
else we came up with.
when someone comes in looking for you to vary applications, conditions are appropriate and cleaner than to worry about what could happen in the future. The application is on, now I'm looking at it, and what the applicant's attorney said is on 11 acres, and that's, should be 11 acres, one lot, 11 acres, if that's what the application is.
Have we noticed
And then,
both properties?
I have no idea which one they noticed.
Only noticed,
If they only noticed,
just 6 Anorak, right?
if they only noticed the 8 acres, then the application actually should be
Amended
if
to
it's for
include,
11.
assuming they want to use both lots, they
And
would have to have.
an amendment when
Right.
you're adding 3 acres, if it would require a new notice, because there could be neighbors within the, whatever the parameters are, who aren't noticed on the 8, who would be
Yes,
noticed on the 11.
possibly you could have, may
Possible. I
not,
don't
may
know.
not, but I think to be official on this, we want to.
My understanding is that neighbors within the requisite distance were noticed around the entirety of the property, both lots. That's my understanding. I did not handle them.
No, I
And
don't
the
think so.
application submitted was for 6 Anorak, and only those residents within 250 feet of the 6 Anorak property line were sent the public notice.
Okay. So,
8 never came into
So,
play.
Mr. Rossi, you know, you don't want that.
I
Because
understand.
a notice of, an invalid notice like that will end up negating whatever you're looking for, so.
okay, so,
So you want to make sure you have a clean notice here. If you're going to come back next month anyway to address this further,
we do, although as I stated, we were hoping to be able to start the process of the barn building. But if we have a defect of that type, we're not going to, I think the application itself is clear that it shows it, but I'd rather then shift. So then if we've only noticed it, then both of these petitions, 3 of the petitions, and now a 4th petition should come before you next month and be properly noticed. I grant that. But in order for me to have, and I know it would just be a discussion with the board, not in any way binding, but the issue of the lots, I would like to be able to present to you the possibility of having both lots remain separate, if in fact there already hasn't been a merger under the code, because for a balancing of the equities between the town's interest, the neighbor's interest, and our client's interest, we could have both lots, and I might propose that we have both lots encumbered by the special permit, and then provide that and it's not an unprecedented situation. We could have 2 different tax lots on opposite side of a road that are both encumbered by one special permit. And things like this arise in land use. But I would then say that we would have a specific condition that says the lots can never be sold off separately without the special permit being amended. Because quite frankly, in fairness, I think it would be better for the applicant to have to deal with coming to your board to amend the special permit and have your board take a look at it than have to go through a subdivision process. Because we're talking now about a subdivision process that I don't even know if they'd be able to meet that. And so if they have a non-conforming lot, then we should be permitted to retain that status. So our application will kind of weave that concept into it, amend what is currently before you with regard to the 3, and submit a new one.
okay, that may be the best approach, and that will
I
give
think
us
so.
time to maybe speak with town council also to make sure that, everything is in compliance.
Sure,
here.
and I will copy, and I'll correspond with Jerry if that's okay with you, just to bounce these things off. But I think I've been doing it long enough to think that that's a fair, workable compromise where there's still plenty of teeth on the town side to ensure that nothing can be altered with the special permit with regard to that lot being sold off.
Because of course, the more usable space you can provide or demonstrate, the more likely you are to get closer to your horse number, assuming we approve the horses.
I agree. Agree, and also allowing Kayla to use that other property in connection with this in all likelihood makes her even love the property more and be wanting to stay there more. Which
And
is
I would want to
currently.
speak to town council to find out what options are available to this board that we
Sure.
could consider regarding the
Great.
merger, unmerger, whatever that would be
Great.
related to this property.
Great.
So,
Appreciate it very much. Thanks.
okay. Any other questions of the app? So I think we're going to basically put this in abeyance until next month's meeting. I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to carry this over. Any other questions of the applicant's attorney right now that any of us have? Anything that you want to address?
So you're also going to file another application for another area variance specifically with reference to the human habitation?
Yeah. Mr. Newman, I'm calling it the mixed use aspect. So, yep.
Right.
It's been hard
Let's try
to
to
keep the
address all
variances straight.
Now, I do have one question. You mentioned that they have currently 4 senior horses. Now, the application is for 6.
It's for 6.
What will the other stalls be used for?
They'll be for Kayla's private horses. I use the 4 retirement horses just as an example of the types of horses that she would have there. They're her horses. They're owned by her. And she would only have horses owned or what's common in the horse industry, possibly leased by her. So if she leased a horse that she wanted to ride, for example, that's another way of owning it. But that's, in fact, another very appropriate condition that she'd be agreeable to on whichever of the special permits it's appropriate for. So, right.
I think the barn as proposed at this point in time has 6 stalls, a tack room, and a washroom. I think that's how it's set up on the main floor there, with
right.
the accessory apartment on the second floor. I
Yep.
think that's what we're
That's it.
talking about here, just to be clear. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions for the attorney for the applicant? Okay. I'll go out to the public now for any comment. One thing that we have decided is that we're going to limit public comment to 3 minutes per person. This is something the town board does, and we're going to adopt that here too. So please make your points within 3 minutes, and I'll try. We want to try to get to everybody, but we also don't want to be here for 6 hours regarding this. Does anybody wish to speak in regard to this application? Yes, ma'am. What we're talking about right now is the application before us, which is related to the special exception use permit for this property and the issues that go along with it. And then also we are discussing the issue of cohabitation of humans and domestic animals in the same building.
Mr. Chairman.
And we're also, excuse me, sir.
Are we talking about the accessory apartment only at this point?
Actually, I think what we're really talking about is number 5 and number 4 and number 5. We're really talking about both items because both items are pending before us in a carryover. Yeah, you can read the agenda here. So I will take comments on either or, but like I said, I'm going to limit each person's comments to 3 minutes. Okay? So if you'd like to speak, please. The way we're going to handle this is if you'd like to speak, please come up to the microphone, give us your name and address, and then you can tell us what you like.
My name is Dominic Veltri. I live at number 3 Anorak Drive. This is the 3rd meeting, Mr. Chairman, that we're here about 6 Anorak Drive, 8 Anorak Drive, a accessory apartment over a barn, a 6-stall barn, potentially a special use permit for horses. Mr. Rossi says it's a farm. Mr. Potter, who's a co-owner of the property, said it's a farm. Employees may live in the apartment, so is it a business? Is it a farm? Is it a residence? Is it private? We talked about 4 horses last time, and Ms. Cochette said she was interested in a pony. So is it 4 or is it 5? The code says cats and dogs are animals. It also talks about domestic animals. I made this point last time. The code was written and adopted for this town. Doesn't matter what New York State says. This town adopted the code. I implore this board to read their code, understand it, and come back to the next meeting prepared to deliberate on the code of this town. Because they haven't done this, you haven't done this, you don't understand your code, and this is the 3rd time I'm here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? Yes, ma'am. If you could please come up and give us your name and address.
Donna O'Connell, 5 Anorak Drive. I'm living here 26 years since 1992. I'm also a full-time associate real estate broker with Houlihan Lawrence for 22 years. I just wanted to mention the fact, and I want to use this here, the horses, there's not enough usable property for all of those horses she's talking about. And you said you did a little drive-by. They're going to be on her front lawn.
We walk the property,
Yeah.
just so you're aware.
There's no horses going to be on the steep slopes. So she's thinking about putting horses in a very bad situation, right on the road in her front yard, which is going to be directly across from my driveway. And I have pictures here that I just wanted to show you because it's really scary and it's really unfair to us.
Why don't you?
25 years. I just want to show you. This is my driveway. This is where the horses will be.
Yeah.
Okay?
Just so you know.
Horses.
Yeah, ma'am, just so you know, all board members, we visited the site and walked the entire site and the
So
road.
you probably understand that there is no room for all of those horses. And this is what's upsetting to us because
Ma'am, you have to speak into the microphone. Yeah.
our property values will go down if there are all those horses in the front lawn. And we've been there 25 years, and this is our life. This is where we have improved our properties, we've made them nice, and now we want to have horses in our front yard. There's going to be manure smells, there's going to be dust, there's going to be horse flies, there's going to be rats, mice. I mean, it's going to be horrendous. And it's really changing the character of our neighborhood, and I'm really upset, as I'm sure you could hear. It's just going to have a negative effect on our neighborhood, and it's just not horse property. It should have never been sold as horse property. It's all steep slope. You can see all of that is steep slope. You can't climb up that property. So, I mean, I just want you to consider that. It's a really bad situation for the neighbors. We're going to have manure smell. Nobody's going to buy our houses. They're going to come by, and that's going to be constant smell. Constant dust, constant flies. And those horse flies bite. Okay. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, in the back, please. Yes, if you can just come up, please give us your name and address.
Hi, my name is Joan States. I live in Sherman, Connecticut, and I am currently keeping 2 of Kayla's horses at my farm. I have 5 acres. I have 2 of my own horses, and like I said, I'm keeping hers. Since we've moved here for 2 years, I've had nothing but people coming that have lived in the neighborhood and seen that property vacant for over 15 years of horses and been so happy to see them. My property runs right along a main road, Hubble Mountain. I have good fence lines. I'm home. You have to have somebody there watching. That's why Kayla's mom will be living in the apartment. She works from home. There will be somebody there. The horses are always looked after when you have them in your own care. And these concerns that these neighbors have, if you've only lived in your home for 25 years and never lived near horses, really, the fly population, the smell of manure is managed in this part of the country by manure dumpsters. Kayla's going to use a service that I use called Sweet Peat. They pick up your dumpster, they turn it into mulch. They make a lot of money off of it. When properties are managed like this, it's not a problem. It just isn't a problem. So people who don't know horses don't know what it takes. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of management. It takes a lot of maintenance. And Kayla she's been my vet for 2 years. I think incredibly highly of her. She's very professional. She takes care of her animals. These horses will not be neglected. There will not be an overpopulation. When I don't have her horses there, I have 2 extra stalls vacant. I like having the extra room. I can move mine back and forth in the wintertime if I can't turn them outside when I'm going to clean their stalls. It's a nice thing to have, is to have some extra room. You don't want to be at overcapacity when you have horses. You just don't. I know, I'm a horse owner. I've had horses for 50 years. I've had horses at my home we've lived in 3 places. In Texas, I've had horses. In Kentucky, I had horses on my farm for 11 years, and now in Connecticut for 2. Never had a problem. And it's a management, it's a maintenance, and it's a constant care. And I've had nothing but kind words from my neighbors, and I'm really sad to hear what I've heard so far here. So I hope that she gets granted this opportunity because she's a great person, and I know she'll take good care.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak in regard to this application? Yes, ma'am.
I was going to speak tonight.
Please give us your name and address.
I'm sorry. Patricia Humphreys at 4 Anorak Drive. I was going to speak tonight, but it seems that you're extending the comment period until next month. Is that true? You're going to allow us to speak next month?
That's correct.
Okay, then I just wanted to know that, and I'll speak next month.
Okay, thank you.
I think we may have closed the public hearing on the issue. Maybe
we closed the public hearing on the accessory apartment, but then, of course, we've amended that application. So by default, it's basically been opened again at this point in time. Right. But, I'm sorry, sir, just before we get back to you, is there anybody else from the public who wishes to speak in regard to this application right now? No? Okay, yes, sir.
I just was going to say we don't have any objection whatsoever to deeming the accessory apartment public hearing open for purposes of the proceedings. So I did want to state that.
Because there have been some amendments to it, and I think it would be best, because we're trying to look at all the issues related to this.
I mentioned it to Jerry as I was walking by. I thought it would be appropriate. If there aren't any comments, if I could respond to a couple of those,
Sure,
I'd appreciate it. And it would ask Kayla to supplement this if she deems it necessary.
Right.
I've never ridden a horse, but I've worked on a lot of horse farm projects like this. I am under the assumption, especially in my experience with dealing with Jerry, that if you deemed it appropriate to grant this, that the special permit would have a lot of conditions that address these things. A horse farm of this size, just properly run by a veterinarian, and the special permit, I think, is already provided for in your code, but we would have no problem agreeing that it's personal to the applicant. So if she was ever going to sell the farm, then the special permit would have to be renewed. There's really not too much better a situation than having a veterinarian owning a private horse farm. It's going to be private. There will be no leasing of horses for people to come and ride. Right. You cannot bring your horse there and pay her to board it. It's exactly what your code provides for. It's a special permit use for the keeping of more than 2 horses.
I know, as of right, she can get 2. Anything more than that is a variance, and that variance is a 1-year renewal.
Yes.
It can renew automatically, but if there was a violation, we, of course, could rescind.
That's the beauty.
Rescind the permit if we decide to grant it in the first place.
That's the beauty of the special permit process.
Right.
So the gentleman who commented on being familiar with the code, it simply is exactly what we're applying for, and we're familiar with it, and our veterinarian will agree to it. Also, Kayla being the horse person, 6 horses aren't turned out in a paddock at one time. It's a recipe for disaster. It would never happen. The paddocks, the beauty of having the 2 paddocks is to permit rotation of the paddocks for probably 2 horses at most at any time, and retired horses to some great degree as far as her current plans are concerned. Concerns with regard to vermin and flies and smells of manure are easily addressed by conditions of your board. The horses eat and, for the most part, defecate and urinate in their stalls. The bedding has to be removed. A truck comes periodically to take the dumpster away. Sweet Pete is a very well-known, highly regarded company in the Dutchess, Putnam, Westchester area for that types of use. So all of those concerns are legitimate ones, but ones that become not legitimate by the conditions that will be imposed and by good stewardship of the farm, which, again, a veterinarian of really high regard locally will follow. So.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so this matter we're going to adjourn to next month's meeting. A revised application will have to be done, noticing both properties.
And given to me within, I need early.
Yeah, all information has to be provided definitely at least 10 days before next month's meeting.
That won't give me enough time.
Oh, for the notice.
That gives me enough time to gather stuff to get to you. That does not give me enough time to do my public notices and get them out.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say we need to touch base and talk.
I know you've touched base with a few people.
Yeah, in your office, but I need to make sure that I have what I need and the application and the fees so that I can get what I need to get done in a timely manner, and I'm not holding up my public notices. Yeah, next Friday would be ideal. All right?
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll find you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda this evening is that of Anthony and Catherine Porco. This is an application for an interpretation under the Town Code of the Town of Somers pertaining to a non-conforming commercial use in a single-family residential district located in an R80 district. Is someone here to represent Mr. and Mrs. Porco? Okay. I'm sorry, if we could please take conversation outside. We want to continue with the meeting, please. Good evening, sir. If you could just give us your name and position for the record.
Sure. I'm Chairman Canistra, members of the Zoning Board, good evening. Michael Caruso, 3871 Danbury Road, Brewster, New York, for the Porcos. Good evening. So before we get going, I'd just like to ask the board what you wish for me to lead off with tonight. I know there was a letter from Whispering Pines attorney asking about whether the jurisdictional issue needs to be sharpened further or whether I can get right into the application.
If you would address that issue, because I did see it be brought up by Whispering Pines attorney, so I would like you to address that, the jurisdiction issue.
Sure.
And then go into, the issues as to why you believe the property is in violation.
Sure.
So.
Okay. Addressing the jurisdiction issue, I won't go through the points of the letter that Mr. Rabel wrote. However, I will just read from the final page of the decision that the Supreme Court rendered on the challenged jurisdiction, and just identify that nothing in the court's order limits this zoning board from going beyond any of the purviews in the order, the court's order, or any of the specific processes that the property owner has identified are new, if you will, that being rock crushing or jackhammering if they're interchangeable. The court actually said that what we have proposed in the several iterations, if you will, the requests for interpretations to Mr. Citarella, that they are different. They're not restatements of the same determination, and thus they're not echoes of one another that would otherwise limit the scope of your review. In fact, the court said it was more persuasive, the petitioners, meaning the Porco's arguments, that the scope of the ZBA's review will potentially exceed the scope of the building inspector's determination. That's true, because you're going to engage, hopefully, and I trust you will, in a very holistic analysis of this site and how it's been used over time, and it's been used for a very long time. So the court said it's not discernible how broad or narrow your review will be. I agree with that, and I'm not asking the board to engage in any wider analysis than absolutely necessary, just what's appropriate here. And if the board finds things that are relevant, it can self-regulate and it can consider or gloss, or look past whatever it feels is irrelevant. So I think the board is in a perfect position to do that and has the ability to self-regulate. So I don't think there's really anything that's off the table, if you will, in terms of the processes, if that's what we're distinguishing between. So with that, I think, would you like me to begin?
Yes.
Sure. So this application is deceptively simple. We've had quite a few proceedings. The board members, the audience, there's a lot of people here. Certainly there's high emotion as we've experienced, but with all that said, your task is deceptively simple. And I think it's important to go through a history, briefly if you will, and I can do that with some of the exhibits we've provided to you. And I'll reference them along the way. So both sides here, the application is basically, as you know, my clients feel that the processes that are being undertaken on this site, which include tub grinding mulch, crushing rock, and if you will, manufacturing a saleable product in quantity, in bulk, all of those processes taken together are illegal because they didn't start that way. However many decades ago, this property was owned by the Cook family and their predecessors and whatever their operations were at that time. It's not an organic growth. And we'll show you in just a moment how this board and predecessor zoning board members acknowledged the nonconformities that have existed over the years. So basically, your code, as you're well aware, has provisions, and we'll cite them later, that identify that nonconforming uses shall not be expanded. In fact, they can only be continued in very narrow circumstances. Certainly, they shall not be enlarged. Qualitatively, are the processes different? Are the things that are being generated on this site fundamentally different than in the 1960s, 1970s, 2000s, early 2000s, I should say? So let's start in the beginning, and I'll start with what is Exhibit B to the Porco affidavit, which you have. And all of this I'll go through in a bit of a summary treatment, so I know we're getting on in hours here. I don't want to consume too much time. 1962, Exhibit B to the Porco affidavit. Your zoning board finds, and Margaret Cook applies for an order directing the issuance of a building permit to construct a building to store and sell nursery products and affiliated merchandise. 1970, the zoning board in this town, by Margaret Cook's application, sought a variance to enlarge, quote, a non-conforming nursery and florist. That was in violation of Section 142 of the Town Code at the time. That's Exhibit C to the Porco affidavit. What I'm trying to establish for the board, and the reason why I call this deceptively simple, is that your own record and all the proceedings before prior zoning boards have long ago established the nonconformities on this site. Starting with 62, reaffirmed in 70, fast forward to 2000, Exhibit D to the same affidavit. Margaret Thomas and John Cook make an application for an interpretation to this board, not necessarily all the people on this board, of course, for the enlargement or alteration of a nonconforming use under Code Section 170-94. They propose a new building on the upper portion of the property. The same attorneys that are here tonight representing the Cooks and that operation presented evidence, and this is the zoning board's words, they presented evidence demonstrating that the 1970 variance that I just referred to was intended to permit the sale of landscape supply equipment. And in 2000, the zoning board here clarified that 1970 variance, which was a bit unclear, to permit, quote, the sale, service, and rental of landscape supply equipment, certain machinery not to exceed 40 horsepower or 7,000 pounds, in addition to other related landscape supply equipment sales such as mulch, topsoil, and gravel, which were permitted to be sold, not manufactured, at the property. So that was a clarification this board gave in 2000. Again, the limitation is on sales, not manufacturing, not producing, not processing. None of those words were used, just sales. 2007, fast forward again. This is Exhibit E to the Porco affidavit. You'll see several resolutions. At the time, there was an application for subdivision approval. I'd like to take you through some of the language that's recited in those resolutions. And at the time, again, this is the record. This is the town's record. These are things that are not subjective, if you will. We have a pile of affidavits. No doubt Whispering Pine has a pile of affidavits that say what happened when. What I want the board to focus on, what I think is critical, is what your own record states. once again, in 2007, one of the resolutions, Exhibit E, identifies that the board granted conditional subdivision site plan approval for Parcel A, requiring that certain notes be identified and added to the plats that limit tractor sales, service, and bulk material sales. No processing. Another resolution with similar language for another lot, which is Exhibit F. So if you turn with me for a moment to Exhibit E, the second page of that resolution, again, this is your planning board making these findings. The first whereas clause identifies the uses on the subject property prior to subdivision were considered non-conforming uses, permitted pursuant to variances that were granted in 62 and 70. Once again, relating to sales, not manufacturing. As you proceed through the resolution, I'm just going to paraphrase briefly. Again, these were findings made on the record. These are in the resolutions I'm citing to you. The third page of the same resolution, which is Exhibit E, the planning board identified that questions arose regarding the subdivision and the validity of the action in relation to the criteria of the zoning board to make the original determination that the action is not an expansion of a non-conforming use. So there were issues back in '07 as to whether what they were proposing, which again was just sales, was the expansion of a non-conforming use. Further into that resolution, the planning board made further findings based on site visits that there were violations regarding impervious paving at the majority. There were erosion control features that were improperly installed. There were encroachments into regulated wetlands. The height of certain fill piles in the northeast corner of the lot was found to be in violation. That was not on a prior site plan. There was concern expressed by the Conservation Board regarding stormwater features, and it goes on. Ultimately, on the 6th page, there was another paragraph that the planning board identified that states, at their April 5th, 2006 meeting discussing the need for a use variance relating to substantial changes regarding material storage bins in the paved areas that they were proposing on certain aspects of the site. So once again, what I'm trying to lay out here is that there is an established pattern before this board and the planning board of non-compliance with code. And even when the prior applicants made planning board applications, there was a litany of violations that were noted on the property relating to material storage, environmental conditions, a host of factors that you'll see in these resolutions, these conditional resolutions. And once again, one of the conditions noting that one of the plats must read, permitted uses on the property known as Whispering Pine Parcel A, limited to tractor sales, service, and bulk material sales. And these being non-conforming uses, again, on the next page. So what I'm trying to establish is that, once again, there's no mention in your planning record of any of these processing activities. The activities that we've identified as tub grinding, rock crushing, making gravel, generating a saleable product on this site. It's never been before your planning board. It has been to a degree, but those conditional approvals were not satisfied. They were not built. They were not pursued any further for reasons that I don't know. But the point is, years later, after '07, we get to 2013, when Ephraim Citarella issued a notice of violation, Exhibit G, to the affidavit, which identifies we've received, we being the town, complaints of rock crushing, tub grinding, and mulch. And the building department has come to the conclusion that you are in violation of the town ordinance. Mr. Citarella going further to state that you are no longer permitted to continue this operation. So once again,
And what year was that?
2013, March 20th was the violation letter, Exhibit G. And as this has been before the board many times, I've talked about the settlement agreement that emanated out of the Justice Court in March 7th of 2014. And we can go through that as well. But the point I'm making here is that your own record has objective proof in your meeting minutes, in the findings of other boards, in the findings of the planning board, that there are nonconformities throughout the course of this site's history. nowhere have I found any mention or authorization for processing of materials, operating these machines that generate a saleable product on this property, anywhere. Notwithstanding whether it's happened. Whether it's happened is another story. That still makes it a violation and an enlargement of a previously identified non-conforming use. So then we turn to the settlement agreement, and this is where things get a bit murky, but ultimately what this document attempted to do was to fashion a site plan. And I'm not going to opine and inject my own personal views of this document, but there are a lot of things that are in this instrument addressing processing activities, addressing site planning concerns, environmental concerns. It even goes so far to say that in one of its preamble paragraphs that the parties have reached an agreement based on review of those prior variances, existing code rules and regulations, cases, authorities, quote, with a view to the interests of justice as it affects all parties, including neighboring properties. And as I think this board knows, I don't think any of the neighboring property owners were aware of these terms when they were ratified by this document. So again, it's a brief history of time, if you will, of your own code history and some of the prosecution and some of the planning and zoning records that identify throughout nonconformities. And those nonconformities were relating to just sales, not a mention of processing activities. So in the legal memorandum that you have in front of you, forgive me, we also identify that your code has certain sunset provisions relating to nonconforming uses. Your code doesn't intend for them to go on forever. It doesn't intend for them to expand, certainly. And certainly in an R80 district, this does not belong in the current configuration. So I think the code is quite clear. If you like, we can go through the provisions that we're relying on. But even if you were to consider this a change to another non-conforming use, if you find that this processing activity that we've identified, any of the activities, are somehow lawful, the factors under 17097A that would allow this board to approve those non-conforming changed uses still doesn't support that they're lawful or should be allowed to continue. Based on just how extreme and just how noxious that they are, and in such close proximity to neighboring lots. So one thing I also want to show the board, which you have in front of you here, just forgive me 1 second. I printed out and had these enlarged slightly. These are images that were downloaded from Google Earth, and as you can tell, the date on this is 07. The reason why I've printed out so many of these is just to show the board over time what's happened on this site. So, oops. Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. So notwithstanding all the issues that we've just discussed, the Porcos lived somewhere over here, and the development at the time in 07 wasn't fully built out. This is the Whispering Pine property here, and you can see the back of it here towards Carmel Mayapack. As we progress through time, you'll start to see, obviously you see material bins here for the storage of material outside. There's various equipment on the site. But as we proceed through, let's see. I'm afraid there's no easy way to do this. From 07 to 14, you can see a marked difference in the back of the lot here, which doesn't appear to be all that well traveled or maintained. In 14, you're certainly starting to see very large piles throughout the property. Machinery down here that was never there. I don't know when it was, these were relatively the same time of year. I'm not sure whether that makes a difference, but again, when you go through to 15, you're going to start to see a little bit more work in the back of the property here, and you're going to start to see a little bit more definition once again amongst these piles of materials that are being stockpiled. And as we proceed through to 16, once again, you can see how the material in the back of the lot and the equipment that's along this side bordering the Porco property and other properties, especially with this equipment here, we're pushing right up to the boundary line of the property. There's trucks over here. There's material all over the property now. So pretty hard to ignore that from 09 or at least 07 to 2016, there isn't a significant development in how the property is being used, materials being stored, and equipment that's being used to generate that material and locate that material throughout different parts of the property. But that's not taking place. So again, that's just a little bit of photographic evidence I wanted the board to have. So at this time, I think with a brief run through of the issues, a brief run through of some of the legal issues, I know the board's well versed. I don't want to take up a ton of time right now. I know you have a lot to hear. I'll yield to my client for a moment. I know he has some videos that he wants the board to hear before we move on.
Yeah, just one thing. So it's your position that the processing of material on the lot is in violation and is a new activity? Absolutely. That's your position? All of the processing activities, not just one. Right. And it's your request or what you're proposing is those activities should not be taking place on the property and should cease? They have no place in the code. They have no place in an R80 district. They just don't belong. As I said, I emphasize quite deliberately in the record, in your record, material sales. And I think all of the variances, all of the planning resolutions and zoning resolutions and decisions state, decades ago, this was for material sales, equipment sales. I don't see a shred of paper, and there isn't one in this record before this board, that shows processing materials, either tub grinding, crushing, hammering by hydraulics. Anywhere is that sanctioned. Certainly not in a residential district. So to demonstrate from my client's property, Anthony has a video, just as a quick demonstration of how loud this is, Anthony has some videos. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how we're going to judge sound from a laptop here. Well, look, you need to be able to contextualize what this is audibly for someone who's living within 100 feet of the, or 200 feet of the site. And Anthony has quite a few videos.
It's my backyard. I deal with this on a daily basis. I'll fast forward a bit because it's a 10-minute video. Feel the vibration. I come home from work, I lay on the couch, I feel the vibration in the couch. I can't escape it. I go into my basement, it's loud. I go upstairs, I go in my bedroom, there's nowhere I can go. I find myself leaving my home more and more each day. Some days I get in the car and just drive because I can't stay in my home. That's the jackhammer. There's more jackhammering videos. I have thousands. You can hear my kids out in the backyard. You hear the jackhammer above them. Tub grinding. It's like a freight train coming through my backyard.
August 3rd. This has been going on for 3 or 4 days now.
8 hours a day, 9 hours a day. Starts his machinery up at 7 a.m. Warms it up till 8 a.m. By 8 a.m. it's in full bore till 4 or 5 p.m. That's tub grinding. This is the dust that accumulates in my backyard. That's stone dust.
Okay. Now I'm front of my car.
Here's my car. And I'm not worried about getting dust on my car. It's getting into my HVAC, no doubt. My kids are breathing this in.
Okay,
all my neighbors are breathing this in.
You can see all that. This is just from today. This morning.
It's been a nightmare for 6 years, 7 years now.
Windows. Top of the car. It's all the dust.
This is taken in my neighbor's home. His daughter trying to do her homework. This video was taken inside her home. That was inside her home. This is the crushing of gravel.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Just happened to be
I live with this every day.
Mr. Riley will tell you that they're limited, or Edmund Granger will tell you that they're limited. They're not limited. This was a bonus they were given for 40 weeks out of the year. They only can't, that agreement said they... Sorry. This is the full view of his business.
This is insanity. You can see him working there. What? The dust coming up. All the smoke.
You'll see it pan across.
Dirt. Whatever he's doing. Look at this. This is insane. Look at the amount. Look at this. Look at this place. Over here. Numerous machines working. 2 machines over to the left. Machine over here. 2 machines on this side. Look at this place. It's insane.
That is blacktop. Old blacktop right there. He's now accumulating.
Insane.
Mounds and mounds of old.
What I think,
You call it pavement. I don't know.
what I think Anthony's trying to drive across, apart from the visual and just how intense the operation is, some of the other materials I sent to the board recently is a letter from Westchester County Bureau of Environmental Affairs identifying some dust issues that haven't been regulated, that haven't been cured. There are problems here that, and I'll borrow a phrase from Don Rossi for a minute, editorially, this board needs to be concerned about why this nonconformity is a major problem for the people in this room. There's dust flying around. We have no idea what suppression methods are being used when they're crushing rock. It's never been through site plan for these processes. We have no idea what's going into the storm waters, what's eroding, how these big piles that are 10, 20 feet tall, are they being kept? Where is the material washing into? There's been no environmental regulation or site plan review. Sooner or later, there's going to be a significant health issue, if there isn't one already that Westchester hasn't identified, that should have gone to site plan. And that's why this is a bigger problem than the strict code issues that I've identified. Because environmental review is responsible. It should have been done. It needs to be done. And I'm not saying these people don't have a right to earn a living. That's a different issue. But in a neighborhood as densely populated as this, in a town in Westchester, northern Westchester County, environmental review and SECRA exist for a reason. These activities need to be regulated. They at least need to go through some form of environmental review. And if not, they need to be stopped. So with that, I'll turn the floor over unless the board has any questions of me.
Any questions, Mr. Caruso, at this point in time? No? Okay. I'd like to hear from Mr. Cook's side now.
I'm sorry, Steve.
Evening. For the record, my name is Stephen Rabel. I'm with the law firm of McCullough, Goldberger, and Stout, and I'm here on behalf of Whispering Pine. I believe Mr. Caruso was asked to first address the issue that we raised concerning jurisdiction. So with the board's permission, I would like to touch base on that.
Yes, please.
So first and foremost, one thing that Mike noted was that he said that the board could, in his words, self-regulate or address any issues that it feels are relevant. That is absolutely incorrect under New York state law. As this is an appellate application, you are a board of what's called limited jurisdiction under section 267A of the New York Town Law. And what case law says is that you are only allowed to look at those issues that are raised in an appeal. So the question that we have asked you, and the question that Judge Schultz raised, is what issues are we talking about in this appeal? So we have a letter from Ephraim Citarella, October of last year, that is what the applicants are appealing. We last appeared before you in March 20th of this year, and we discussed primarily whether or not they had timely filed an appeal of what we argued was a restatement of prior determinations by the building department and the town. The zoning board found that you do have jurisdiction, that it was a timely filed application. We appealed this to the Westchester Supreme Court, and a stay was granted while that court case was ongoing. For those who are not aware in the audience, the court agreed with the zoning board that it was a timely filed application. We do disagree. I'll note now we filed a notice of appeal. But we're now back here under the court's order. But one threshold issue that Judge Schultz raised was, what is the scope of the board's jurisdiction? So Mr. Cittarella's letter, that's the basis for the appeal, doesn't cite any section of town code, doesn't cite any particular use, it just says there's no violation. There was a question asked of Mr. Cittarella, I think at our last meeting, March 20th, it could have been an earlier one, as to what's changed on the property. And his speculation was, well, it really only relates to an increase in production, perhaps due to an increase in demand. So we would first argue that his letter was related specifically to an increase in production over what had prior been produced, not a change of use. We would second argue that when we were in our discussions about whether or not this was a timely application, that the applicants decided to make the argument that this application is only related to what they call jackhammering, but what it's, as discussed before, it's a hydraulic hammer, so we'll refer to it as hammering. We didn't ask them to do this. Their attorney got up and said, you know what? This is about one new thing, jackhammering. He's quoted in the resolution where the board decides it has jurisdiction on multiple occasions, saying this is specifically about jackhammering. And I'm under the belief that the board, at least in part, based its determination on the testimony of the applicant's attorney. So we would argue that if the board decides that this is in some way about a new use, that based on the applicant's own arguments, it is limited to the specific use of hammering and rock crushing. I don't know if the board has any questions on this as of now, or if you'd like me to discuss jurisdictional issues.
Why don't you go into jurisdictional issues?
Okay. So before I get into the legal arguments, there was some discussion of what's the timeline here. And I'd like to walk you through the timeline of Whispering Pine's business. So Whispering Pine was founded as a family-owned nursery and landscape supply company in 1957. I went back, I found the town code from 1957. It was a permitted principal use at the time. Part of what they engaged in from day one was the screening and selling of topsoil, the processing and selling of mulch, and even by hand, the processing of gravel out of the materials that were brought on site. That's from 1957 when it was a permitted use. So when they raised an issue, how come this never came to the board as a non-conforming use? First and foremost, this was an integral part of their business from day one when it was a permitted principal use in 1957. From the very beginning, they used a diesel-powered loader to turn over large piles of mulch. So from day one, they used machinery on site to process these materials. As time goes by, what happens is they modernize their business, which they are entitled to do. They modernize the core elements of their business. In 1962, a variance was granted, as noted by council, from the zoning board, and part of the restrictions imposed noted to limiting repairs of machinery to machinery used in the operation of the nursery. This indicates a clear understanding by the zoning board that the nursery is using machinery. It's an existing use that they're aware of back in '62. The 1970 approval was to expand the non-conforming nursery and florist store. And as stated, the processing of materials is integral to the nursery business. In the 1980s, Whispering Pine began using a tub grinder to expedite the creation of mulch. In 1989, they first brought a hydraulic hammer onto the property to break up larger rocks. In 1990, they began crushing their own rocks for gravel rather than sifting it by hand. Since 1990, there has not been any significant change in the technology or machinery or processes used by Whispering Pine. I want to repeat that. Not since 1990.
When were the homes built on the adjoining property?
I can't speak to all of them, but I could tell you that the applicant's home was constructed in 2008.
2008?
Yes. You'll recall from our prior submission, we actually got an affidavit from the developer of the home saying well aware of the processing activities, and in fact, he sold it to the previous owner, prior to the applicants, at a discounted price because everyone was aware of the processing activities. They had to discount it. Oh, I'm sorry. So, before I get into the legal arguments, I just want to reiterate, since day one, they have been processing. This is what it means to be in the nursery and landscape supply business. We submitted materials back in April. I know we haven't been back to you since, in which we cited a very similar, very recent case. I'm referring to the Amodios case out of White Plains, which explicitly stated that processing is integral to the landscape supply and nursery business, and that modernization is part and parcel with what you're doing, and you need to update and modernize in order to stay in business. Before I continue, there was an issue raised in the letters by the applicants about an abandonment of use. I didn't hear that addressed. Is that still an argument made by the applicants? Back in April, a letter was submitted arguing for an abandonment of use. And I don't know if that's something that we should address now or if that's been withdrawn.
Let me just speak to it briefly.
Sure, sure.
If the board considers any of these issues, non-conforming uses and the continuation of them, forget about the enlargement, continuation of non-conforming uses depends on them to be ongoing and no cessation. Any cessation or abandonment of an existing non-conforming use renders the use gone. It's not something, unless you continue the use in its current form, you lose the right. That's supported in a wide range of contexts in case law. That was probably driven out in the letter. So I think that's...
Are you claiming that there was a cessation?
Well, I think the record, and this is where it's my client's application, however, the burden, if you will, is kind of the inverse. Whispering Pine needs to show this board with real credible evidence that since the 50s, it's been utilizing tub grinders or whatever machinery it says it has, uninterruptedly for that period of time. And the board will have to decide whether if a tub grinder is brought once a year for 2 weeks, and that happened for 10 years, and then for 20 years before that, there was no tub grinder, but then there was a tub grinder for 30 years before that, the board needs to weigh whether that is a significant break in the chain. Because if there is a break in the chain, you lose the right to continue that non-conforming use. So that was our position, and we'll still maintain that there is not enough evidence to support a continuation over 50 years of each of these material processing activities, regardless of whether they were modernized. So,
thank you.
There we go. So, just to address that, first and foremost, we are not the applicant. There is a standing interpretation from the town code enforcement officer that there is no violation on the property. Moreover, he made no opinion whatsoever as to whether or not there was an abandonment of use, so that's not something that's being appealed. But let's make no mistake, the applicant has the burden of proof, if you will. The onus is on them to prove that the building inspector was incorrect. We're here defending the town's standing interpretation because it affects our property, but we're not the applicant to this board. What I'd also like to note is there has been substantial information submitted showing, at least to some extent, some of the uses on the property dating back to the 50s. There's been aerial photos submitted, photographs submitted, affidavits, letters from contractors. There's a substantial record. I would also note that a cessation of use that is required for abandonment is 12 months or more under the town code. My recollection of the letter is that their argument was largely based on the fact that some of these activities only occur twice a year, which, as you can tell, is not 12 months in a row. But I do agree that it is an infrequent use or an infrequent activity that is part and parcel with the landscape supply and nursery use. Mr. Crusoe also made arguments regarding arguments that this is, I suppose, a change or expansion of a non-conforming use that's not permitted. We submitted substantial documents outlining all of the case law that supports the fact that A, in a specific instance of a nursery and landscape supply company, processing is part of the primary use, and B, that increase in production is not an impermissible expansion of said use. We've also shown that just because they use more or less of their property, which was already developed as a nursery and landscape supply company, doesn't mean it's an impermissible expansion of use. One item we saw in the applicant's papers was that they made an argument that the non-conforming use was established through an existing illegal use. I would just like to quickly state that this property was established with this use legally in 1957, so that does not hold. I had another question for the applicant's counsel. They put forth an argument that the use was enlarged and that it was changed, which to our mind seems a bit contradictory. If the nursery was enlarged, it wasn't changed, or if the nursery was changed, it wouldn't have been enlarged, it would be a new and different use. So we would ask that they clarify which of these arguments they wish to move forward with. Finally, I would note that, sorry, I just lost my spot here. I would like to reiterate that the expert opinion that was the basis in part for the Amodios decision specifically identified similar, if not the exact same, processing activities as being part and parcel with landscape supply and nursery use, which we know was a permitted use on the property when this started. So what we have is a legally non-conforming use that has modernized its business, but has not met any of the thresholds as determined by the court for an impermissible expansion or change of use. I believe I have touched on everything in our papers. One issue they did raise in their most recent submission, and then a little bit here, was environmental review. And we would note that Department of Health has been out to the site. There is environmental oversight of this. And they've been told that they need to get a different permit than what they thought they did, but it's really an issue of paperwork. I'm not sure what the intention was with that submission, but there is environmental review. And provided the proper paperwork gets in, the Department of Health will presumably determine that this is acceptable. And lastly, just on the applicant's video and discussion of the impacts, we would note that that's really an issue for the court. I believe there's still a nuisance action pending. We actually do have our litigation attorney, Terry Granger, here if you have any questions. But the impacts of the long-standing use at Whispering Pine really are to be litigated in court.
Could you address maybe the settlement that the town made with Whispering Pine and the judge's decision here in town? Could you just address that a little bit and what impact or, you know, how you feel about that?
I can talk about some of the terms. I don't know about how I feel about it. So, as was noted earlier, initially the town issued a violation to Whispering Pine. They appeared before Somers Justice Court and submitted not just materials on their property, but a myriad of case law and It was ultimately decided that based on the prior zoning board decisions, the prior activities on Whispering Pines property, case law, and I'm sure Terry, as the attorney who litigated it, could speak in more detail, a number of other factors, there was no real violation because this was a long-standing, previously existing use on the property. So they did agree, as part of the settlement, to certain restrictions on time, which is between February 1st and June 30th, and September 1st and December 15th for processing activities. And such activities cannot take place between Monday and Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and never on any holidays. I believe both parties found this to be an equitable solution, but short of that, I'm not going to opine on the terms of the settlement.
And what was the date of that settlement?
I know it was 2014. I don't recall the specific date offhand.
Okay.
It was March 7th.
March 7th, 2014. Okay.
At that time, when the building inspector issued the violation or the determination, could that have been appealed to the zoning board?
Which letter from the building inspector are you referring to?
The one that ultimately resulted in the settlement.
I believe it could have, if it was considered a determination, yes.
But it was not.
To my knowledge, it was not. I don't have the letter in front of me. I couldn't tell you offhand what it said. So I don't want to opine as to whether or not it should have been appealed. You want the letter?
I'll just read it into the record. We have received complaints of rock crushing and tub grinding mulch. After reviewing your file and further investigation, the building department has come to the conclusion that you are in violation of the town ordinance. You're no longer permitted to continue this operation. That's Exhibit G.
I was just curious why that, before it got to town court and a settlement agreement, I was just curious if there was any reason that that didn't come before the zoning board at that time.
I was not involved. It sounds like they were able to work it out in town court rather than, and so the opinion in and of itself was redacted and overturned.
One of the things the applicant is arguing here is that jackhammering is one of the most specific things that's a new use on the property. But I think some of the documents in the past have referred or discussed jackhammering in the past.
That's correct.
Yeah.
What has been called jackhammering?
Right.
Hammering using a hydraulic hammer
Right.
attached to the excavator.
Right.
So that's correct. We argued as part of our initial submission documents and continue to state.
Because if the jackhammering has been discussed in the past, going back many years, how does the argument come to fruition now that it's a new activity? I mean,
We argued that it was not a new activity, that in fact there were no new activities. But in determining that this was a timely appeal, it was inferred, at least from the minutes, that there was some new activity. And I think perhaps that is a question for the board as to how that new activity was decided or what that new activity consists
I think I'd like Mr. Caruso maybe to talk about that also, because the jackhammering seems to be, or the hydraulic hammering, whatever you want to call it, seems to be kind of the major issue in the processing of this gravel, you know, the making of the small gravel from the large. But if it's really a new activity, it seems to have, I've seen some documents where it seems to be discussed going back in time, quite some time. So maybe you could address that.
Yeah, I think semantically, we have to look at Ephraim or the building inspector's ability to investigate. They have absolute discretion, even if it's a restated complaint, if you will. Ephraim or the current building inspector has absolute discretion to go in and investigate and issue a violation or not. Whether it's jackhammering or it's all three or even a new process. The fact that it's just jackhammering doesn't prevent him from going in and exploring the other uses, nor does it prevent this board from doing that. And I think that's what the court was getting at as well, in saying that your review could very well be broader than Ephraim's determination, for example, if it was just hammering.
Right, because Ephraim felt that there was no violation on the property when he was here as the building inspector.
Right. Well, again, it's just speaking to the point of it really goes to his discretion and whether he decides to investigate the complaint. We could restate it 100 times every week as it occurs. He could just throw those in the garbage if he doesn't want to enforce them or investigate them. That's his discretion to use his resources as he sees fit.
Okay.
But I think, you know, it's pretty clear that it doesn't limit this this board's grant of authority, however limited it may be, to look at the other processes.
Okay. Mr. Granger.
Just to quickly touch on that, again, I want to reiterate, the court was not saying that you can decide whatever you want to review. The court's opinion says, we don't know if it exceeds the building inspector's interpretation, meaning we can't opine if the intended jurisdiction is beyond what's legally permissible. But I want to reiterate, state law and case law say you are, as far as appeals go, a board of limited jurisdiction. You can only address the issues that are part of the appeal. And even if Ephraim had specifically listed a myriad of processing uses, which he didn't, the applicants themselves said the reason this is timely is because we're only looking at hammering. That was their decision. They limited their own application. And from our perspective, it's not fair to Whispering Pine to say, well, we're only limiting it to hammering so that you can get in the door with the 60 days. But you know what? Now that the board has rendered their decision, and now that the court's rendered their decision, you know what? It's actually all of the processing uses. You can't have it both ways. We didn't ask them to limit the scope of their application. They chose to. And that's why we're saying this is a limited jurisdiction, assuming it's even a use at all and not the issue of increased production, a limited jurisdiction to hammering.
Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions right now from the board to either of the attorneys before I go to the public?
You know, just quickly before, I know we have a lot of this just floating around, but on this settlement instrument, I just really need to drive home the point here that when we're talking about environmental review, I'm not limiting that or the board's consideration to whether the Department of Health has issued a permit for airborne particulate. I'm talking about holistic site plan review, negative declarations, engineers, stormwater planning, you know, erosion control, all the things that have never happened on this site. That settlement agreement did it with the stroke of a pen. That's not how the process works. This was a total bypass of site plan review. That's the big problem here. And this board needs to be concerned that this could happen under the aegis of another code violation prosecution that results in another settlement agreement in an R80 district, notwithstanding the 57 code, that does not permit these activities today. So that's the bigger problem here, from an editorial standpoint, if you will.
Yeah, by the way, what is the status of, you have a separate suit pending with the Supreme Court regarding a nuisance action.
Correct.
What's the status of that? Because that's been going for quite some time.
There's actually two litigations by two different groups of homeowners. Terry, who's sitting next to Mr. Cuck, is litigating the first. My office, when I was with another attorney, has now handed that off to another attorney. That's getting closer to trial. The second of the two actions involving similar issues is at a much, much earlier stage. But none of those should really infringe upon, I believe, what's happening in this board right now.
Okay. Yes, excuse me.
I want to address that one issue that you just raised.
Okay, if you could please just come up to the microphone, just give us your name and who you represent here.
Ed Granger from McCullough, Goldberger, and Stout. Good evening, members of the board and Mr. Chairman. as was indicated, I do represent Whispering Pine in both litigations. In the Porco litigation, there is a court-ordered settlement conference tomorrow morning before Judge Lefkowitz. I can't tell you what will happen there, but that at least brings you up to date with respect to the status of it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the attorneys at this point in time before I go out to the public? You want to comment? Sure.
I just want to very quickly respond to the comment about process and environmental review. I would like to reiterate, Whispering Pine has been here long before the development in question. And as part of the subdivision and inevitable site plan development for all of these homes, an environmental review would have been undertaken by the town in which they looked at the fact that this was an adjacent use. Beyond that, the environmental review of previously existing uses is not really an issue for this zoning board. Thank you.
I do have one question. Regarding the tub grinder, what material actually goes through it, and what is the final material being made on the tub grinder?
So, do you want to answer that, sir? Yeah, I'll answer it. So the owner of Whispering...
Is it just strictly leaves? Is it wood? Is it roof balls?
Sir, just give us your name for the record.
Tommy from Whispering Pine, Tommy Cook. The waste that comes in is branches. It's separated. There's logs. They're all separate. Leaves. Everything's separated and goes in individually.
Now, when people, say for instance, from my understanding, you will accept, say for instance, bulk leaves from contractors.
Yes.
What is your process of processing that? Does that go through the tub grinder too, or do you turn around?
Leaves
so
are...
it all goes through?
Yes.
Then how many times does it get hammered?
Once.
Do you go through a course and then you go through a fine
No,
stage?
2-inch screen. Once.
Yes, but there are two different screens.
For the branches and logs, yes. Leaves, one go through.
And then it takes a period of time for it still to break down for you to sell it as what material? You sell it for?
Mulch.
Just mulch itself. Thank you.
Yeah.
May I say something about that? Anthony Porco, 19 Brianna.
Sure.
He probably left out tree stumps, which when the leaf goes into the tub grinder, you're hearing basically the machine. When the stump goes in, it's obnoxious. And particulate goes up in the air. I can show you video particulate coming down in my backyard. Neighbors in Mayapack will tell you that particulate hits their houses from the tub grinder.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I will say that I have been around a tub grinder, okay, multiple times. And I do know the type of sound it does make, and I do know the hazards around it and stuff, material flying. I just wanted to make it perfectly clear for myself of what material does go through there. Yes, logs do go through there at a massive diameter, up to 6 feet, if I'm not mistaken. It depends upon the grinder itself that could handle a log, say from 24 inches round up to 6 feet long. So I'm just wanted to make sure of, I understood, make it perfectly clear of what material is going through this tub grinder. And regarding stumps, yes, it can process stumps with no problem whatsoever.
Okay, I think we're going to go out to the public at this point in time. As before, I'm going to limit everybody's comments to 3 minutes. So whoever would like to come up, ma'am, if you'd like to come up, you can start, please. Sure, come on up. Just give us your name and address.
Okay. Hi, I'm Linda Calamari. I live at Carey Street. I'm in Mayapack, actually. My house is here. We're looking at it. My backyard is here. I have Yorktown on one side, and I have Whispering Pine on the other.
So your property is adjacent to Whispering Pine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Again, thank you for the memory down lane. How do you say it? Memory lane. Trip down memory lane. I've been there since 1974. Not as long as Whispering Pine has been there. Very nice. Gone there, bought my Christmas trees, and then a few years later, you know, they went into actually repairing lawn mowers, things like that, brought in for repair. Very, you know, nice. Nothing. About 6 years ago, I'm on my deck, and I fell asleep in the sun, and wakes me up, and I'm hearing this noise. Okay, where's that? So I see the pile building. That's from the Taconic, putting all these piles up. Okay, well, we need to do the Taconic. That's good. Maybe they have something going on with the state. They're bringing dirt in. I don't know. But I'm living through all of this and just watching. Okay, so eventually the piles were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And, okay, didn't know anything about it, hearing all the noises. Okay, now that all of this came to a head, which I didn't even know about because you're going about your business, someone, I guess, came up and said, there's jackhammering, you know, and then we can't live like this and blah, blah, blah. But we're homeowners. This is where we live. We want to relax. We want to be home. I'm not in the Whispering Pine business. I don't know, from jackhammering, this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and piled up, literally piles up. So what I'm trying to say is we're just trying to live a normal life. I understand you brought, you know, you have more people working for you, obviously, since 20 years ago, so you're building up your business, which is great. Everybody wants to build their business, but you don't want to hurt the other guy next to you either. You want to support your local businesses. How do you do that when you're stomping on other people like us?
Have you heard these noises for many years or just recently, or?
I'm going to say the past 6 or 7 years. I had a pool in my backyard. I had parties, no problems. I never heard. I had the horses in the backyard. They would come very nice, Mrs. B with the cane. You all know her, right? The horses used to sometimes jump over, come on the properties, but then they, you know, that went away. And then that all started. And I understand you want to feed your families and you have your jobs and all that. Well, we want to do the same thing over here. I mean, we're supposed to be neighbors. We're supposed to help each other, not drive each other crazy. And that's what happens. You go nuts. You hear it. I mean, I don't hear it as bad as they do, but let me tell you, then the woman up on Boniello, poor thing, I went in her yard and see she's got piles of dirt next to her lawn. And I walk down, it goes all the way down. How do you smell this stuff? I get to smell at my house. My neighbors over here, they have their smell. You know, he's allergic, all right? He has a medical condition. You know, I'm starting to feel that whatever's going on there, it is an environmental thing.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
I want to try to hear from everybody, so I want to just keep moving a little bit. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, please come up. Please give us your name and address.
My name is Pamela Hirsch, 2463 Evergreen Street. I do not work for Whispering Pines. Most of these people do not. We are supporters. I'm sorry that they have to live with the dust or noise and all this stuff, but there's something called caveat emptor. Buyer beware. You see how big, from your pictures, that Whispering Pines is. It wasn't hidden from any of the neighbors that bought the property next door. It was well known, unless Tommy is some sort of magical, phenomenal magician hiding all of this. This was there, the piles were here. I was here for 50 years. Caveat emptor says buyer beware. When you buy a home next to a place like this, do your due diligence. Be aware of what you're buying. They had the choice to move into 1,000 different homes. Tommy didn't. They chose to live next door. I'm sorry, I feel bad for you, but you chose it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anthony Forco, 19 Brianna Lane. Back in 2012, I started making complaints, and for 2 years, no one listened to me. finally Mary Beth Murphy, who was the town supervisor at the time, came down, took a look at what I had and said, you know what? You've got something here. That's when she sent the building inspector down to Whispering Pine, wrote them 2 summonses for violation of their site plan, and gave them a stop work order. After a short period of time, she had called me up and said, you know, Mr. Porco, I'm sorry, but the noise is going to continue for a little while longer because he has to remove all that fill that he just took in. He was taking in 40, 50 truckloads a day, I want to estimate, because I would sit there and count from the project on 202, the new entrance on the Taconic. 40, 50, they'd come like a merry-go-round. They'd come off 202, cross Lexington Avenue, down Route 6, into his place, dump, go. And as he went, another one would come every 5 minutes. And that was not part of the 26-week agreement. That's outside of the jackhammering, the tub grinding, all the obnoxious activities that go on. So she apologized to me, and I said, you know what? Just let him leave it. And she said, no. It's illegal for him to leave it. It's against the site plan. It's in violation of the site plan. Legally, he has to remove it. A couple of months went by, no noise. I said, okay, they're letting him leave all the fill he took in. When all of a sudden, one day, it starts up again. And I called the building department to find out what's going on. And at the time, Ephraim Citarella was the building inspector. He wouldn't even get on the phone with me. But one of the girls in the office told me, well, we have an agreement now with Whispering Pine, and they're within their legal right to do these things. And I said, who made this agreement? And she told me, Gerald Riley and Whispering Pine. So they sat in a room, didn't tell any of the neighborhood people. Gerald Riley and Whispering Pine sat in a room and came up with a new site plan, stamped them a new site plan. Didn't go before planning, didn't go before engineering, didn't go before any type of review. I don't know if this is proper procedure. I don't want to put the new building inspector on the spot, but I think I know the answer. In 2007, Whispering Pine wanted to put up a building and expand their parking. And at that time, the planning board wrote out a resolution, 207-02. And this is exact words out of that resolution. And they tell me that it wasn't gone, it never went through. They didn't put up the building. They didn't go through with the plan. But it tells you the thinking of the planning board back then. The permitted use on the property, this is word for word, known as Whispering Pine Parcel A, is limited to tractor sales, service, and bulk material sales. So how is it that Mr. Riley sits in a room with Whispering Pine in 2012 or 2014 and allows the alteration of the operational business plan of Whispering Pine? Why would you need that plan if he had a legal right? There would be no reason for that plan. And all the while, Mr. Riley still sits here. At the Article 78 hearing, when Whispering Pine's attorneys argued that you didn't have jurisdiction, Mr. Riley waited approximately a week or two and then informed the judge that he didn't agree with your decision to hear this. He told the law clerk that he didn't agree with your decision. So if he doesn't agree with your decision, how can he sit here now and be unbiased and give you advice on how to deal with this? He gave that agreement. He sat in the room with Whispering Pine. Now he's here trying to defend it. He shouldn't be here. He should be recused. We asked him twice to be recused. He still hasn't. I think he's on a slippery slope. Mr. Canistra, you asked me, or you didn't ask me, but at the first meeting when we were here, you said you wish that we would come up with an agreement between the two of us, that you wish that the parties involved would come up with an agreement. Well, there were two things offered to me. One was by Rick Morrissey, who told me, and actually he didn't tell me, he wrote me a letter, and he said that he would ask Whispering Pine to move their machinery around back of the piles. I wrote a letter back stating, and I have it with me, that had been tried before, it didn't work, and we needed a real solution to this problem. I never heard back from him. The other solution was from Mr. Riley, who told me in a 20-minute phone conversation that when a noise starts, I should put my kids in the car, drive down to the Bronx Zoo, go to Dominic's restaurant, have a cannoli, and relax. That's disgusting.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to read an impact statement, please, if you would mind.
Can you please, go to the microphone, just give us your name and address. Keep in mind, ma'am, we're going to limit this to 3 minutes.
My name is Lana Magro, and I live with my husband Alfonso at 22 Rosemary Court in the small community of Stone Ridge in Somers. I am here tonight because of the deplorable situation that has overtaken the neighborhoods surrounding and adjacent to Whispering Pine Landscape Supply. And please let me say that this in no way implicates Whispering Pine Nursery, as they are two totally separate entities, and the nursery has never been at issue. We moved into this neighborhood in April of 2010. At that time, there was no problem with noise, smells, or air pollution coming from the Whispering Pine Landscape Supply. In fact, the activity was not noticeable and had little impact to the neighboring homes. There wasn't even a sign indicating that they were there. Within a few years, Whispering Pine Landscape Supply transformed into a very active business with large landscape trucks coming and going constantly, deafening racket from stone crushing and tub grinding, and awful acrid odors emanating from their property. I personally had an accident with one of the trucks coming out of your business. Supporters of the activity that is taking place at Whispering Pine Landscape Supply may say, well, they were there first. Yes, they may have been there first, but they weren't crushing stone and making mulch and creating the problems that are plaguing us now. They were simply a retail operation. Anyone who says differently is not being truthful. We pay a premium in taxes to live in this lovely little enclave of homes. The constant racket and awful odors should not be something we have to endure in a residential area. The kind of work they perform is industrial and should be located in an industrial zoned area. I think it is reprehensible that it has not yet been brought to an end. To my point that we live in a residential area, and in reading through the code for the town of Somers, Chapter 123, Noise Prohibited Acts, Whispering Pine Landscape Supply clearly violates the law outlined in the town code. These violations have greatly compromised our quality of life. With all due respect, I have to ask, Mr. Cook, would you want to live next to all this irritating racket? Would you want this in your backyard? Do you want to deal with loud banging, ground shaking, and repugnant odors when you get home from work? How would you feel if your 4-year-old granddaughter didn't want to play in the yard with you because she couldn't stand the smell? I don't know what is being carried in the air from all the stone crushing and tub grinding. Is it safe for my family, especially my small grandchildren, to even be playing in our backyard at all? Is it safe to barbecue and have dinner in my backyard patio? Will we find out 10 years from now that these activities were creating carcinogens in our neighborhoods? These are all questions I shouldn't have to ask. Please note we are not even on the side where it is a more noxious, ear-splitting, and detrimental problem. You could just imagine what my poor neighbors that are closer are experiencing. We are hard-working, tax-paying citizens who have paid dearly for our homes. I implore you to please respectfully regard our neighborhood residents and put a stop to the obnoxious and insidious landscape material that is being manufactured in our backyards, and have it relocated to a more suitable industrial zoned area where it belongs. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak in regard to this application? Sir.
Good evening, board. Thank you. Thank you for your time. My name is Joe Lucia. I'm actually at 21 Rosemary. I'm directly up against the Whispering Pine Nursery. Just to start out, I've been a small business owner myself in this area for 20 years. I know all about, obviously, expanding businesses and having to modernize. I understand that. I've patroned their place, bought stuff at the nursery and so forth. So I don't think it's a portion of ethics here. I think the main concern is, and my main question, I guess, to the attorney, I'm sorry, sir, I don't remember your name, or maybe the board, is one of the statements was made was that they went ahead, I believe, in front of the health board, and the comment made by the attorney was presumably, if the right paperwork is completed and put into place, that the health board would approve whatever was needed to be done. So I don't know, presumably means to me that's not completed or not going to be approved, or may not be approved. It's up for discussion, I guess, if I'll be approved or not. and there's still pending paper to be done. Yes, it is annoying, the jackhammering, hydraulics, whatever it is, the smell of the manure when they make the mulch is annoying, all those things. My daughter was actually the one that was trying to study for a final, going through that bang on that video that was made by presented by Mr. Porco. My major concern here is the health. I have 4 children, a wife, 2 dogs. It is hard to go outside, to go try to have barbecue, to play in the pool, play my kids catch whatever in the backyard, go on the swing set, and it's covered with stone dust. I have relatives that are in that quarry business. They've told me that it is health issues with that stuff, rock crushing. I'm sure there's things that can be done to minimize or maximize the health of that, or there's procedures in place. I don't know them. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a health person on the health board. I guess my main question is, what is being done about that stuff? If the health approval is not done yet, and is presumably going to be approved, that means to me it's not approved yet. Once that's approved, once that is in good order, I think this could all be resolved by both parties in the right fashion. The nuisance of the noise, another issue which obviously I won't rehash because we went through this. That's obviously a discussion and another topic that's being adjourned through courts and so forth. But my main concern is the health of my family, my neighbors, and I think that the owners of that would also agree with that. On a side note, I just probably out of order in saying this, but I thought that as an ethical professional of an attorney, to turn to that client just now when that woman was saying she got hit by a truck and saying to him, learn how to drive, tells a lot about your character, sir. You could deny you didn't say that. You know you did because I was right behind you. That's disrespectful, unethical, and just not being a man. So to say that
Okay, woman, please, that poor woman sir, here. Sir, please address all comments of the
sorry.
board. I don't want to get into personal.
I don't need it, but I thought that was on. As a neighbor and a friend of mine, I thought that was out of line. Whether it was her fault or not, you don't say something like that, especially as a professional, ethical business like you are as an attorney. So, board, I would ask to please just, if anyone can answer that or address that, please, I'd like an answer to that, or at least steps to be done to that. And I think that my major concern personally is the noise. Yes, is one thing, but more importantly, the health of my family, and just making sure whatever environmental things have to be done are done properly to know that I can go outside and play with my family and live in a neighborhood where I'm not going to, God forbid, develop cancer or have an issue or a 9/11 situation like those poor people that went down there and helped those, those people in need. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am, please come up. Please give us your name and address.
I'm Alice Seda. I'm on Mahopac and Carey Street. I have a cold, so I'm sorry.
Gil Seda, 98 Carey Street, Mahopac.
Okay.
I'm here listening to everything that's going on, and I'm a little astounded because I moved here in 2000, and I raised my children. At no way in form or shape Whispering Pines was doing this. We used to have a backyard where we used to be able to go out. We used to see our neighbors up the hill. Right now, there were mountains. Prior to this, today, there were mountains of dirt or mulch, whatever it is. It's about from that wall, I would say, to the white car outside, and yay feet high. I don't know the numbers, but it's not visible. You don't get to see the sun go down. You don't get to see any animals around. My cabinets, and this happened not too long ago, last week, or about 2 weeks ago, my dishes were rattling. Now, I'm not as close as the Porkers are, but we're about, what do you say?
No, we're borderline with that.
The dirt keeps coming back. What I don't like is the noise, the crushing, the smell. I have video of it on all my cars. The dust, the dirt, the smell, the odor. What's troubling is that it's moving down. And while I didn't know Whispering Pines purchased where my yard ends, these mountains, and you see these trucks, and I call them caterpillars because I don't know, that's what I think it is, where you climb on mountains, these trucks, and they move dirt. I mean, I'm afraid that can tip over. But it wasn't there from 2000. So for the attorney to say and show proof that they've been in business this long, no. This has happened about 5, 6 years ago. we never had this problem. And I enjoy where I live. I moved from the city to come up here, not to hear this. I left the city sound to be in the suburbs to raise my children and my grandchildren. And my grandchildren can't go out and play. This is unfair to us. We're in a residential area. They're manufacturing. They were not manufacturing before. I knew Whispering Pines as a nursery, not as a manufacturing. And I think that it should stop. My husband is home. He's disabled. He's been sick for the past 2.5 years. Okay, getting sick month after month, over after over, and it's upper respiratory. Well, how many upper respiratories can you have? I mean, he's disabled because of multiple sclerosis. But the noise, the sound, the smell, I mean, it's just not, enough is enough.
One problem that I have especially is we weren't properly notified that this work was going to be done at Whispering Pine, or a request to get this done. When I came to the town hall meeting, or zoning board meeting, that's where we actually found out what was going on. You folks, or they did not send us any notices saying, by the way, this is what we plan to do. Meanwhile, Navajo Sports Complex sent us all letters, said we plan to put these big fans. We want you to come to the town's zoning board meeting so you could either agree or disagree with what we're doing. And that was properly done. But these guys, they did nothing. I live in Mahopac, or maybe because Mahopac don't count because we're in Putnam County. Is that the reason why we weren't notified? We were not notified. Swear and stack of Bibles, we were not notified. And if we were notified, show me proof that they sent letters, signatures received.
No, not of this.
You're talking about notification of the pending zone, but that's only
When-
notification for
yeah.
residents of Somers.
Right, so
So it's okay, so just residents of Somers, all right.
only the residents of Somers.
Okay, so then me and Putnam County, who reside right next to, you don't matter?
We
Is
have
that
to, we
it?
have to follow the law.
All right.
We have to follow the law, so.
Hi, my name is Amy Sage. I'm a resident of Mahopac. I'm also the Putnam County legislator that represents the Mahopac district for all these streets that are affected by Whispering Pines. And if there's a change in the site plan, if there's a change in the zoning, they have to notify all residents within 500 feet of the border, and including the Putnam County Planning and Zoning, as well as the town, Carmel. None of them were notified. I called Putnam County, and they had no record, and I called Carmel, and they had no record. So no one was told about this, and this
Jerry,
is
could you give
the
a comment on
border.
this? I don't know why. I mean,
Can you just clarify what,
If there's
notified about what?
if there's an agreement for the change in the site plan.
No,
Okay.
no. The agreement, first of all, there was no notice to anyone. There was a prosecution.
This was a settlement.
And a prosecution, and
Right.
a motion to dismiss, and a settlement among the court, myself for the town, and Mr. Granger for Whispering Pines. No one received notice.
There was no notice
There was
of
no
that.
note. This was a quasi-criminal prosecution.
This was a
Has
settlement.
nothing to do with any
Between the
planning
town
board
and
or-
Whispering
But it was something, but it seems like they changed their operations, and they changed, their site plan should have been changed, and.
Well, that's
if-
the argument, and that's what's trying to be
Correct.
determined here. That's the fact we're trying to determine. We're trying to gather
So what the
information to
agreement,
determine that.
was the agreement not a new site plan?
There
What was
no
the
new
agreement
site plan
then,
with
if
the
it wasn't a
agreement. It
new
was just
site
an
plan?
agreement as to the operations on the property, right?
No, the new.
What happened was there was a criminal prosecution brought based upon the complaint from the Porcos. At that juncture, they defended it, McCullough Goldberger. There was a settlement, and as someone reported here, there is a case, Amodio against the city of White Plains, or White Plains against the Amodio Landscaping Company. It is precisely as close as possible to the litigation that I was prosecuting against Whispering Pines. In that case, there was a trial in front of Judge Colabello with witnesses, experts, etc., and Judge Colabello determined that the processing of the gravel and the mulch was part and parcel of its sale. That matter then went to the Appellate Division, Second Department on appeal, and the Second Department upheld Judge Colabello. And as it's in the record that was part of the bases that was resolved, that it was settled upon, because the town is responsible to follow legally the second department. It controls Westchester County, Queens, and Brooklyn, Long Island. So based upon that, it was settled. The issue was precisely what has been addressed here, whether the processing of those 3 items is included within the sale, because I think it's correct. I think I've read the record as much than anyone in the world. There is no report of processing throughout the 60, 70-year history in front of the various boards. But there was that court case on a absolutely identical thing, so that is the reason we settled, and no one received notice. It was between the town and the Whispering Pines and Judge Timon. That's it. So the lady is right. There's nobody got notice whether they lived in Somers or Mayapack or Putnam County.
Thank you.
If the board wants to see that point laid out on the site plan issue, you can you turn to page 2 of the settlement agreement. Paragraph 1 says a site plan and area map's been prepared by Insight Engineering depicting the following activities. Point 2, site plan will establish the physical boundaries in which all the functions located in paragraph 1 will be confined. And then it identifies the functions, any changes of location. It identifies a few more provisos, and then it concludes with the provisions of the agreement will run with the land. It's a site plan approval.
Mr. Caruso, this was not a site plan that was done by the planning board.
Right.
It was a drawing in which we reached an agreement with the help of the judge to move some of the processes that Whispering Pines was utilizing
to plot out basically
near the subdivision property away. That it was a site plan.
But that's not a site plan.
It was a drawing.
Right. To support the settlement. Okay. I understand what's going on. Okay.
Just to continue, to speak on behalf of the Putnam County residents, tonight at these proceedings, you approved an 8-foot fence. Imagine having a 20-foot berm that's just been moved on your property line. That's what my Putnam County residents have to deal with. I have pictures of stone dust and mulch, dirt, all over their cars, on their little kiddie pools where their little kids are swimming, on their front doors. There's stone dust everywhere. I looked up the New York State Health Code law, and they specifically state that silica and silicosis and crystalline silica exposure causes lung problems and cancer. I would imagine that if someone was in a union and they had a contracting job, they would protect themselves with materials so they're not breathing in this material. These kids running in the backyards don't have the protective gear on their air conditioning units and their in their houses. They can't open their windows. So it is definitely a health issue. It's a safety issue with the huge stacks of mulch and dirt that they're moving around. And speaking confidentially with employees of the nursery area, they have told me confidentially that their operations have changed, and that they don't sit out there anymore, and they don't enjoy working there anymore because of the traffic, because of the 18-wheelers bringing stone and materials and asphalt and processing materials and jackhammering and tub grinding, which leads me to a phone conversation with the Westchester County Health Commissioner and the engineers in the health department, who told me that they do not have a permit to do any crushing, rock crushing, and they should cease and desist any rock crushing. They do not have a long-term permit for the rock crushing. They can get a short-term rock crushing permit, but only in certain times, and they have to apply for it. They were in violation. I called them back and they said, yes, they're in violation. They need to stop. When I called the residents, they said, no, they're still doing it. So you as a board need to stand up for your residents. This is why you're here. I mean, you spent 45 minutes talking about a sign issue, and you want your town to look beautiful and livable, and you want people to want to live here. But we're talking 2 different municipalities, all the same problem, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of people. I suggest, you do your homework. I know you really care about your community, and I thank you so much for that.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the audience who'd like to speak in regard to this application?
Real fast.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I want to try to get to everybody's name. So.
Pamela Hirsch, 2463 Evergreen Street. I'll be really fast. You're concerned about your health, yet I've been dealing with Whispering Pines a very long time. I'm sure Tommy wouldn't want to be sick, and I'm sure his family does not want to be sick either. Tommy, I don't know how long you've been there, but I don't know when you haven't been there. You're not sick, you're not having health problems, and I don't think he wants to get cancer. So I think that the people working there for so many years stands for the health that they're in. If somebody was going to be sick, it would be that man. He's not.
Anthony Porco, 19 Brianna.
Yeah.
That's a ridiculous remark.
Yeah, Mr. Porco, please. Yeah, I don't want to get into argumentative things. I want to hear from some new people at this point in time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1 minute. My name is Vito Andriano. I live on 18 Dr. Tony's Road. I live on the other side of town. I have no dog in this race, but I do know Tommy very well over the years. Several years ago when I built the batting cage park, Tommy was the only guy that stepped to the plate and gave me all the material that I needed to build the facility. He probably gave me about 60 yards, 80 yards of gravel. He gave me all my pavers that I needed. He gave me all my drainage pipe. He probably gave me about $15,000 to $20,000 worth of material that I needed to build that park. Now, I feel very bad for everyone that's here. I understand, I see both sides. But I just want to say to you that Tommy is a very decent person and he's very conscientious of what's going on here. And I just hope, and I know it's not going to be easy for you guys, I wouldn't want to be in your position, but I just hope that you all can come together and make a peaceful resolve.
Okay.
Also, well, that's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'd like to address that comment because, no exaggeration, he's a generous man. I know there are people in Mayapack who didn't want to come today because he gave them free mulch. There was a person on my block who didn't want to sign a petition because when they moved into their house, he helped them out. Matter of fact, when I started complaining, he left some gift cards in my mailbox apologizing for the noise. Great guy. But that doesn't take away from the fact that there was a major problem here. There was a major problem here. And a lot of people can come here because he's helped them out over the years. They all have their nice shirts on, very pretty. But that doesn't take away from the fact that what he's doing is unacceptable.
Thank you. Want to hear from anybody else here in the audience?
Lady,
yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Anthony Porco, 19 Brianna Lane. 6 years ago, we moved up from Yonkers to a beautiful place, to be close to family and friends. And along the way, we've made so many friends. But it's really been a nightmare. The whole buyer beware thing, I don't go for that. We knew that was there. There's no way what it is today. We were there, we came to the house 10, 15 times, all hours of the day and night. No way it was there. Maybe I wouldn't have bought my house if it was there. It was not what it is today, I could guarantee that. Our whole lives have been affected by this. My husband's a fireman. He fights fires every day. He delivers babies. He helps people. And he can't even sleep in his own house. At 8 o'clock in the morning when he walks in, he said he doesn't even want to come down the block. They don't realize they don't live there. None of you live there. I know that you can imagine it, but to actually live there, and you're very welcome to come take a look at our site. Like you want to go look at that guy's sign. That's great, but come to our house. I'll put on a pot of coffee. Come and see what's happening in my backyard and all of these people's backyard. I have to leave my house because I can't stay there. My kids can't play ball in the back of the house. My neighbor who has a pool, his kids can't go out. It's in July. I can't have a party. I have to go to bowling or something else, but I have a beautiful backyard, and I can't even have them have a party. Imagine not knowing what you're breathing in. Imagine having to fight every day for some kind of quiet enjoyment. I can't even sit on my back deck to have a cup of coffee. To call some of my neighbors, do you want to come over? I'm embarrassed to have my family over. I hope you have the heart to come to some kind of a decision, to let us know that you care. Because right now we have nothing to go by other than some bunch of papers. And I don't care that everybody loves this man. I'm sure he's a great guy, but that's not helping us. We can't live in our house anymore. We can't live in our house anymore. The value of our homes are going down slowly and dramatically, yes. Please come visit our house and listen to it for yourself.
Anybody else here wish to speak in regard to this application? Yes, sir. Please come up, give us your name and address.
Yeah, Joe Garin, 4 Brookside Avenue, Putnam Valley. The lawyer for Whispering Pines told us that they started in '57 and it was a benign little nursery place, and I'm sure that it was. But something changed in the last 10 years. They went from being a nursery that maybe screened a little topsoil, maybe sifted a few rocks as well as gravel, to being a full-fledged transfer station for material that's brought off the site. So they crush a lot more than they sell. They get money coming in. There's a tipping fee. Now they're bringing in blacktop, broken concrete. It's not a little nursery, a benign little nursery where they just sell what they produce. It's a full-fledged processing transfer station, and that really shouldn't be allowed in a residential area. And he should see that. He's probably a good businessman. He saw a little niche, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now he has a full-blown giant operation that shouldn't be in that area. It's just pretty simple.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Ed Cook, 34 Somerset Road, Mayapack. I've been on this property since I was a child. There's no process of blacktop or concrete going on in the property. That's a false statement. True.
I'll show you the video right now.
Okay, no, I don't want to have, no, listen, I don't want any arguments between people. Gentlemen?
We don't need Rambo running around on the property.
Yeah, gentlemen, please, just address all comments of the board. Yeah.
The board there's been activity on this property for a long time. All the way around. As good neighbors, we built a berm going around and planted it for the neighbors. It's on our property. We lost 30 feet of property. It goes the whole length of the property, all the way from the front to the back. Otherwise, you would see eye height, everything that's on the other side. When they started developing it, that's when we, like good neighbors, put the berm up so that it looked appropriate. We were next door. Maybe the planning board that allowed that development to go that close to the property should be looked at. All that property, storm drains, run to the Hudson River. If it went the other way, it would have been to the Anwalk Reservoir. There's a lot of property there, and it was all, the houses were pushed to the property line for a reason. So this goes back further than just Whispering Pine doing material processing and all that. Those houses should have never gotten put that close to the property. That's cluster housing. Should have never happened like that. That's the planning board here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, Mr. Porco, yeah, I want to hear from everybody. Then you can come back again, but I want to hear from everybody first. I want to try to get everybody in who wants to speak.
Jim Flaherty, 48 Bonnell Drive. I grew up on this road since 1979. Been there almost 40 years. I watched this entire transition. So many false statements going on here. I watched this mound go up 20 feet in the air, and I played in these woods. I was there every day. I hunted in those woods. I was all over there. For them to say nothing changed, this pile went up and up and up, and we complained about seeing it. And then the machines are now on top. You're coming up the road and you see the excavator on top of this mound. Coming home and the excavator is 20 feet in the air on top of this berm. Yeah, it was nice that they put some plantings on there, and they tried. And I'm sure he is a good guy. I got 4 kids I'm raising there. I grew up there. I loved the neighborhood. I wanted my kids back there. We played in the woods. We hiked. We did everything. This noise is unbelievable.
Now, was
These
there-
people aren't making this up.
Let me ask you, was there rock crushing and jackhammering?
I
back
never
10, 20
noticed, 1979, I never noticed any of it. We had a ball field where these houses were. We would play baseball in that field. We would ride our motorcycles in there. We were all there. We were in there all the time. 2005, 2006, I don't know. I don't have the documentation. All of a sudden, that hill started getting built up. And it got built up, and I'm guessing 20 feet, 25 feet in the air, all the way up. Slowly pushing down, boulders rolling down, trees getting knocked down. This is where I live, right here. I'm right on the back end of this thing. I'm right here. It's in my backyard. It's in my pool. My stuff is covered with all this dust. We're not making it up. I hear all the hemming and hawing in here like, oh, they're lying.
Yeah, please speak in the microphone.
I'm living here. I'm living there.
Please speak into the microphone, sir.
I'm living in that backyard. I grew up here. I'm not making it up. I've been in construction my whole life. I wouldn't complain about a little noise. I wouldn't complain about a horse on the other side of the fence. This is a friggin' fire-breathing dragon. Are you kidding me? So, you know, this is why everybody's complaining. This hasn't been going on the whole time. I've been here for 40 years. And it's just the noise, the hammering, and the dust, it bothers me too. I hear everybody saying, oh, stop it. I don't know what I'm breathing in. It's covered. You go across the car, it's covered. You clean your car, it's covered. The grill outside, the tables outside, covered. Every time we have people over, we got to clean that table. It's covered in some kind of soot. It's in the pool. It's all over the place. My neighbor, Mrs. Tarenti, she's right on that borderline. I'm probably 110 feet from that line. And all I see is that mountain now. And they're right. I used to see the deer come through. The horses used to get out of the farm. They used to come over. You know what I mean? And it's just this big mountain there. And it just seems like it keeps going down further and further towards Carey Street, too. Because the dirt just keeps falling down more and more and more. We've always had problems with water. The fight used to be about the water. Oh, you're getting water in my property. This is a mountain that got built there. Where the hell's that water going? You know, so nobody's trying to hurt this guy. Nobody's trying to hurt him. We're all in construction. We're all blue-collar guys. We understand trying to make a buck. Nobody's trying to hurt anybody, but it's unbearable. It's unbearable. And my wife calls me up crying. You can't believe this. You can't believe that there's noise that's going on. You see a fog coming down, like the smog coming down the road. I'm not exaggerating. I wouldn't BS anybody. It is what it is. If it was just a little clatter, I wouldn't even care. I've been around that construction my entire life. And I heard this, I've been to all these meetings and go back and forth. He said this, oh no, we're gonna bring it up. It's a new case, now they're crushing rock. Whatever it is, they're killing us, please. Somebody's gotta help us out here, it's crazy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in regard to this application? Any other comments? Sir? Yep.
Anthony Curcio, Clap Hill Road, LaGrangeville. I'm a supporter of Whispering Pine. My thing is the tub grinding and the yard waste. If Whispering Pine didn't take all that in, it would fall on the towns and the municipalities. So money-wise, taxes would go up. So I think it's good that they take in the yard waste and there's some place to drop it.
Yeah, how long have you been working there?
Where?
At Whispering Pine?
I don't work there.
Oh, you don't work there? No.
Supporter.
Oh, you're just a supporter, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that responsibility would fall on the town.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yes, ma'am, please.
Oh, sorry. Linda Calamari, Mayapack. Across the street from Whispering Pine, they're building a beautiful park, supposedly, I think, on the other side of Route 6. There's trucks going in and out of there constantly, too. But there's not that many residential thing going on there, I don't think. But they're going to build this beautiful park. Why don't you take some of that and put it over there? Make that the industrial part. I don't know who owns that or whatever, but you're going to have all of that going on Whispering Pine, and then this beautiful park is going to be across the street. That's what I think.
Okay.
I don't even know. I didn't get a notice yet.
Thank you.
But I don't know.
Anybody else wish to speak? Anybody else from the public who wishes to speak right now in regard to this application?
I would just like to say one more thing.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, all right, go ahead.
Mr. Flaherty touched on it. The berm is about maybe 10 feet on my side, 10, 12 feet. It's a little bigger on Whispering Pines side. All that berm does is shield him from the noise that we make playing in our yard. It does nothing. It does nothing for the dust. Dust doesn't go straight up and come straight down, as Mr. Cook has testified to. It spreads out, it covers, it engulfs everything. The jackhammering, it vibrates through the ground. It could be damaging my home. I have cracks and nails popping all over my home. I've repaired them, and they come back. My wife said, I'm a fireman. The way we open up walls, sheetrock walls, we take a hook, we plunge it in, and we just slowly vibrate until the whole piece comes down, pulls away from the screws and everything. That's what's happening to my house. I'm getting this vibration constant. You heard how long it goes. It goes sometimes 1 or 2 minutes solid. It'll stop for a few seconds. He'll reposition. Again, vibrations through the ground. I come home, like I said before, I lay on my couch, I feel the vibration in the couch. That's how bad it is in my house. The sound that comes from these machineries, just even from the machineries alone, the excavators, that low frequency percussion, you feel it. You feel it go through the house. You feel it in your chest. I feel it in my ears. It's become unbearable. It's been 7 years of torture. 7 years of torture. And then all the things that lead up to that 26-week period of where he's allowed to do whatever he wants. And it's not 26 weeks. It's about 40 weeks. And he's allowed to pick and choose. Everything that leads up to it. All the trucks coming. Everything getting dumped. Then after it's processed, moving it back around the yard. Moving it to here, moving it to there. And there are piles of blacktop. Believe me. I have pictures. I have video. There are piles of old blacktop. Who knows? That blacktop is made from old diesel fuel. Who knows what it's off-gassing? And it's right on my property line. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Yes, Alice Sada, Carey Street. There's just 2 things I forgot to mention. They start at 7 o'clock in the morning. I work. I leave my house. And I come home and they're still operating. Even on the weekends, on Saturdays. I'm not saying, they're not supposed to do their business, but there's a certain time that you should operate a business. And the fact of the time span. And like Mrs. Parker says, I do implore that you guys come out, but don't come out and let us know that you're coming. Come unexpectedly. Come so that you can see for yourself the pile, the length of the pile, the height of the pile, and listen to the noise. Because if they know you're coming, you're not going to see it. You're not going to see it, you're not going to hear it, you're not going to feel it. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else who hasn't spoken would like to speak in regard to this application? Do we want to go to the attorneys? Any final comments before we?
Unless you want a final comment. I know when to shut my mouth.
It's almost 11 o'clock, so. Okay, at this point in time, any discussion we want to have amongst the board? Do we want to schedule a site visit? We can have one announced where we go and go onto the property with Mr. Cook's approval, of course. And then we could visit at other times. How do we want to approach this at this point in time? Do we want to have some further discussion? We may want to have a discussion with legal counsel in regard to this. I don't know, we have to go into executive session at some point in time and decide how we want to proceed.
I personally think I'd like to have a site visit before an executive session.
Okay. I think that might be a good idea.
And I'd like that to be an unannounced visit.
As long as it's agreeable with everybody.
As long as everybody agrees, we'll come when we happen to come.
Well, if we're going to go on Whispering Pines property, I think we've got to give them some notice, don't we? But we can certainly drive the streets or visit the area at any time. So, listen, please, no comments from the audience. So, we can't go.
As long as a majority of the board doesn't gather
at one time. Can't be more than 4 of us there at one time.
You can drive by and make your all the cases allow for the.
3?
Okay.
Right, 4. If we can't have 4, you have to be less than 4. Right.
But The cases in zoning allow that zoning board members make their decisions because they're familiar with the property, so you can go around there. But I think what you should do is at least close the public hearing, and then put on what you're going to do and when you're going to visit, and decide to visit in groups of 3 or 2, and then you don't have to worry about any time if you ask the property owner if you're able to come on the board, and since I don't think anybody's going to object.
Yeah. Would that be okay with Mr. Cuck for us to have a visit maybe on one particular day that we could come between certain hours so that we can at least visit the property? That would be an announced visit. Of course, the board can go elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So Denise, if you could coordinate with Mr. Cuck, maybe a couple of days that we might be able to visit during certain hours, so at least we could just visualize what's there. The board, of course, on its own can drive the public roads and go anyplace else and assess, other times what's going on. I think that's probably a good first step. Mm-hmm. Then maybe after we do that, then maybe Mr. Riley will talk to you about an executive session where we can discuss this matter further and decide how we're going to proceed on it.
Mr. Chairman, can I make another point, please?
Yes.
He's probably down towards the end of his season, where he operated for about 5 weeks straight making mulch every day, and he's probably not going to do that anymore. He's probably not going to jackhammer anymore this season because he received that letter from the Board of Health saying he couldn't crush rock. Okay. So you'll go there and you'll see his site, but I really doubt that you're going to hear anything, especially with the settlement agreement saying that from December 16th through January, I don't know what the date is, maybe 15th or 16th, he's not allowed to process. Okay. So well, you're really not going to get a feel for...
It's a starting point for us. Okay. I mean, it's something we have to, seeing at least what is there now is better than nothing. So at least it's a starting point. We can drive the roads, and we can go by there several times, at least on the public roads and things. We never enter somebody's private property without their permission. We're just not going to walk onto somebody's property. We don't do that.
Okay. You can come on my property anytime. Anyone from the board who wants to come on the property anytime, you have my permission. Okay. I have thousands of videos that if you want to look at. Okay. Thousands.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
And I think you can go on Mr. Cuck's property because it's open to the public. It's not like somebody's private house.
Okay.
So I don't think you're precluded from driving by there. They're selling stuff there. So as long as you don't go with 4 or more.
Right.
Because then it's a meeting, and then you have to notice that.
Right. Okay. So I think also we probably should, I guess, make a motion to close the public hearing at this point in time. That we've heard from the public, and that we have the documents, and we'll have to decide how we're going to proceed. But is everybody in agreement that we're going to close the public hearing at this time?
I agree.
Yes. Okay. Should we do a formal motion? Is it the best way to do it? Yeah. So do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay.
Melissa?
Yes.
And Umberto? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Do you want to do a vote on this? Should we do a vote, just vote through? So if you could just call
You do it.
Okay, all in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, public hearing is closed on the matter. We're going to conduct a site visit. This is going to be a carryover to next month's meeting, and we'll take it from there. Okay.
As a reminder, Mike and Steve, if there's anything you want me to have,
no,
it's
over.
By Friday, December 7th.
No. Don't ask for anything. It's closed.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. We have a few more matters just to wrap up here with the meeting. So, thank you too. Thank you, everybody. So, if everybody could please take the conversation outside. Thank you very much for coming this evening.
So you're all right? You're ready to go? Good.
Please, if everybody could take the discussion outside. We have a few more matters to wrap up here.
Okay. Good. Yeah. That's what they want you to do. All right, Ed.
Okay. All right, so I believe last item on the agenda is the approval of the October 2018 minutes. I assume everybody's had a chance to read it?
Yep.
Okay, any revisions or changes? No? Okay, we'll approve by voice vote. Everybody in agreement to approve the minutes of last month's meeting?
Yes. Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, last month's meetings minutes are approved. Denise, any other issues at this point in time, or anybody else have any questions or issues that we have to discuss?
Excuse me, everyone.
Whoa! Everybody, please take the discussion outside, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next meeting is December 18th, and we have already 3 items on the agenda.
Okay.
Anything added to what is on tonight, so.
Okay.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, so.
Wait, 3 in addition to
okay.
We have 3 in addition to
new matters. Okay, yeah, so as Denise mentioned, which I'll just say again so we make sure everybody at home hears it, next month's meeting is December 18th at 7:30 in this room. I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I believe December 2nd is the tree lighting ceremony here in town, so if you'd like to attend that, by all means. And I think that concludes the meeting. Okay, thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.